In the dirt streets of 1880s Wyoming, Eliza Vance faces her darkest hour, rejected, humiliated, watching her son fade from hunger. Then Rowan Cade appears, a man whose quiet strength offers more than charity. But accepting help means risking everything she's fought to protect. Stay until the end to see if she survives. Hit like and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The dust never settled in Stillwater. It hung in the air like judgment, coating everything. The wooden storefronts, the hitching posts, the shoulders of men who'd learned to look past suffering without flinching. Eliza Vance had stopped noticing it months ago. Now she just tasted it, dry and bitter on her tongue as she stood outside Brennan's general store, her hand trembling on the door handle. She'd waited until late afternoon, hoping fewer eyes would be watching, hoping the shame would be smaller. It wasn't. The bell above the door gave a cheerful little jingle that seemed obscene against the weight pressing down on her chest. Inside, the smell of coffee and tobacco and new leather hit her like a memory of a life that used to be hers. Before James died, before the land turned hostile, before she understood what it meant to be truly alone. Thomas Brennan stood behind the counter, his thick fingers sorting through a stack of receipts. He looked up when she entered, and his expression shifted. Not unkind exactly, but not warm either. The look of a man who'd already made his decision before she opened her mouth. "Mrs. Vance." He didn't smile. "Mr. Brennan." She kept her voice level, her spine straight. Pride was about all she had left, and she'd be damned if she'd surrender it here, in front of the tins of peaches and the sacks of flour that might as well have been gold. "What can I do for you?" The question was a formality. They both knew she had nothing to trade, no money to spend. But she'd come anyway, because Eli's face that morning had been gray, his lips cracked, his eyes too large in his thinning face, 7 years old and already learning what hunger felt like when it didn't end. "I need flour," she said. "Just a small sack, and some salt pork if you can spare it." Brennan's jaw tightened. "On credit?" "Yes." The word hung between them. Behind her, she heard the soft scrape of boots on the wooden floor, someone else in the store pretending not to listen while hearing every word. "Mrs. Vance, I've extended you credit 3 times already. You're into me for near $15. "I know, and I'll pay it back, come harvest." "You said that last time." He wasn't cruel about it, which somehow made it worse. Just matter of fact, like he was explaining arithmetic to a child. "There ain't going to be a harvest if you can't afford seed, and you can't work that land alone. I'm managing. You're starving." He said it quietly, almost gently. "And I'm sorry for it, I truly am, but I got my own family to think of. I can't keep a handful of flour." Her voice cracked just slightly. She steadied it. "That's all I'm asking. Enough for biscuits tonight. I'll find a way to pay you back." Brennan looked down at his hands, his mouth a thin line. For a moment she thought he might relent. Then he shook his head. "I can't. I'm sorry." The silence that followed was suffocating. Somewhere in the back of the store, a clock ticked. The person behind her, she didn't turn to look, couldn't bear to see who was witnessing this, shifted their weight, making the floorboards creak. Eliza's hands were shaking now, but she kept them clasped in front of her, squeezed tight so the tremor wouldn't show. She wanted to argue, to beg, to grab him by his clean collar and make him understand that she wasn't asking for charity, wasn't looking for a handout, just needed enough to keep her boy alive one more day. But the words wouldn't come. They stuck in her throat like the dust, choking her. "I understand," she heard herself say. The lie tasted like ash. She turned toward the door, moving carefully, deliberately, as if she were walking across ice. Her vision had narrowed to a tunnel, just the door, just the rectangle of harsh sunlight beyond it, just the next step and the one after that. "Mrs. Vance?" She stopped but didn't turn around. There's work sometimes. At the hotel, cleaning rooms. Mrs. Patterson might—" "Thank you." She pushed through the door before he could say anything else, before the pity in his voice could finish stripping away what little dignity she had left. The bell jingled again, mocking her on the way out. The street was emptier than it had been when she'd gone in, but not empty enough. 3 women stood outside the dressmaker's shop, their conversation dying as she passed. She felt their stares, heard the whisper that followed. "Poor thing, what a shame. Should have gone back east after James died. No way for a woman alone out here. She kept walking, her worn boots stirring up small clouds of dust with each step. Her horse, if you could call the old mare that anymore, more bones than muscle now, stood tied to the post where she'd left her, head hanging low in the heat. Eliza stopped beside the animal, resting her forehead against the warm neck for just a moment, letting herself have that much. The mare's breathing was slow and steady, patient, trusting that the human who'd brought her here would eventually lead her home, would eventually provide hay and water and all the things that kept a life going. What a fool, Eliza thought, to trust like that. She was gathering the reins when she heard the footsteps behind her, not rushed, but purposeful, heavy boots on packed earth. "Excuse me, ma'am." The voice was low, rough-edged, but not harsh. She turned. He was tall, probably 6 foot or better, with shoulders that suggested he'd spent his life doing work that mattered. Dark hair, longer than was fashionable, curling slightly where it touched his collar. His face was weathered in that way that made it hard to pin an age. Could have been 30, could have been 40. But his eyes were young somehow, or at least not old. Gray-blue, direct without being hard. He held his hat in his hands. "I don't mean to intrude," he said, and she noticed the slight hesitation, like he was choosing his words carefully. "But I was in the store just now. Heard what happened." Shame flooded through her, hot and sudden. Of course. The person she'd heard behind her, the witness to her humiliation. She'd been too focused on keeping herself together to even look. "Then you know I have nothing to trade for whatever you're selling." She didn't mean for it to come out so sharp, but pride made her teeth into weapons. He didn't flinch. "I'm not selling anything." "Then what do you want?" "To help." The words should have brought relief. Instead, they brought anger, sudden, burning, almost shocking in its intensity. Help. As if she were some charity case, some broken thing that needed fixing by a stranger who thought his good deed would buy him. What? Gratitude? Something more? "I don't need help." Her voice was ice. "With respect, ma'am, I think you do." "You think?" She stepped closer, all the fear and desperation from the store transforming into something fiercer. "You stand there for 5 minutes, hear one conversation, and you think you know what I need?" "No." He said it simply, without defense. "You're right. I don't know you, don't know your situation beyond what I heard. But I know what it looks like when someone's carrying weight they can't bear alone. And I know—" He paused, something shifting in his expression. "I know what it's like to be hungry." The anger faltered just slightly. "I have supplies," he continued. "More than I need for myself. Flour, salt pork, coffee. Let me give you enough to get through the next few weeks." "I can't pay you." "I'm not asking you to." "Then what are you asking?" He met her eyes, and she saw something there that surprised her. Not pity, not judgment, but something almost like recognition. Like he saw her as a person, not a problem to be solved. "Nothing," he said. "I'm asking for nothing." She wanted to believe him. The wanting was almost painful in its intensity. But she'd learned the cost of trusting too easily, of thinking a man's kindness came without strings. "I don't even know your name." "Rowan Cade." He shifted his hat to his left hand and extended his right. She looked at it, calloused, scarred across the knuckles, the hand of someone who'd built things and broken things and survived both. After a moment, she took it. His grip was firm but not crushing, there and gone. "Eliza Vance." "I know, heard Brennan say it." Of course he had. Everyone had heard. The whole damn town probably knew by now that the Vance widow had tried and failed to buy flour on credit she couldn't cover. "Mr. Cade, I appreciate the offer, but where are you headed?" The question threw her. "What?" "Right now. Where are you going?" "Home. I have a homestead about 5 miles west along Willow Creek." He nodded slowly, like he was calculating something. "I passed that way this morning, saw the cabin." Saw the cabin, saw the sagging porch roof she couldn't fix, saw the garden that had yielded nothing but disappointment, saw the evidence of her failure written in weathered wood and dead earth. "Then you saw I'm managing fine." His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes suggested he knew she was lying. Worse, that he understood why she had to. "My camp's about 2 miles north of here," he said. "Give me an hour to pack up supplies and I'll ride out to your place. Bring enough to last you a while. I told you I can't. I heard what you said." There was no irritation in his voice, just patience. "And I'm telling you, I don't want payment. No strings, Mrs. Vance. Just let me do this." She studied him, searching for the catch, the hidden angle, the price that would come due later. But his face gave nothing away except a quiet sincerity that was almost harder to accept than cruelty would have been. "Why?" The word came out smaller than she meant it to. He was quiet for a moment, looking past her toward the mountains in the distance. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. "Because someone did the same for me once, when I needed it. And because," he brought his gaze back to her, "because it's right." In the space of that silence, Eliza felt something crack inside her, not breaking exactly, but shifting, like ice in early spring, solid enough to stand on but no longer frozen solid. "1 hour," she heard herself say. "Then I'm heading home whether you're there or not." Something that might have been a smile touched the corner of his mouth. "Fair enough." He put his hat back on, touched the brim in a gesture that belonged to another era, and walked toward a buckskin gelding tied 3 posts down. She watched him mount, easy, practiced, and turn the horse north without looking back. Eliza stood in the street for a long moment after he'd gone, her hand still resting on her mare's neck, trying to figure out what had just happened, trying to decide if she'd made a terrible mistake or a necessary gamble. The sun was lower now, painting the storefronts in shades of amber and rust. In another hour it would start to dip behind the mountains, and she'd need to be riding if she wanted to make it home before full dark. Eli would be waiting, probably at the window, watching for her return, hoping she'd bring food. She hadn't. But maybe, and the word felt dangerous even thinking it, maybe she would. She spent the hour at the creek just outside town, letting the mare drink and rest in what little shade the cottonwoods provided. The water ran clear and cold, snowmelt from high country, and she knelt beside it to splash some on her face and neck. It helped with the heat, but not with the thoughts churning through her mind. What did she know about Rowan Cade? Nothing. He could be a drifter, a con man, a man with intentions that had nothing to do with kindness. He could follow her home, see how isolated she was, how vulnerable, could take what he wanted and leave her worse off than she'd started. But what if he didn't? What if he was exactly what he appeared to be? A man offering help because he could, because he'd been helped once, because the world still held people who believed in doing right even when it cost them something? She wanted to believe that, wanted it so badly it scared her. The sun had shifted by about 30 degrees when she heard hoofbeats approaching from town. She stood, brushing dust from her skirt, her heart picking up speed despite her attempt at calm. Rowan appeared through the trees, leading a pack horse heavy with supplies. He rode straight-backed, comfortable in the saddle in a way that suggested long familiarity with both the animal and the country. When he spotted her, he raised a hand in greeting but didn't smile, just acknowledged her presence with a nod and guided his horses down the shallow bank to the water. "Thought you might have changed your mind," Eliza said. "Thought you might have too." He dismounted, giving his buckskin some slack to drink. "Wouldn't have blamed you if you had." "I nearly did." Nearly counts for something. They stood on opposite sides of the creek, the water running between them, neither moving to close the distance. It felt intentional somehow, like he was giving her space to decide. "That's a lot of supplies," she said, nodding toward the pack horse. "Enough for a few weeks, I'd estimate. Maybe a month if you're careful." "That's too much. I can't accept it?" He looked at her directly. "Or trust it?" The question landed harder than it should have. She didn't answer. Rowan crouched down, trailing his fingers in the current. "My father used to say that pride's a useful thing right up until it kills you. Then it's just another word for stubbornness." He paused. "He was a stubborn man, died that way too." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. He made his choices, same as we all do." He stood, water dripping from his fingers. "But I learned something from watching him. Learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let someone help you. Not because you're weak, but because you're strong enough to admit you can't do everything alone. Eliza felt her throat tighten. You don't know anything about me. No, but I know what I saw in that store. Saw a woman trying to feed her child. Saw her get turned away. And I know. He stopped, seemed to reconsider his words. I know what it costs to ask for help and be refused. Costs more than most people understand. The mare had finished drinking and now stood with her head low, dozing in the dappled shade. Eliza's hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't from fear or anger. It was from the effort of holding herself together against the weight of everything. The hunger, the worry, the bone-deep exhaustion of trying to survive when the world kept pushing back. If I let you bring those supplies to my homestead, she said slowly, I need to know what you expect in return. Nothing. Everyone expects something. Then I'm not everyone. He said it without arrogance, just stating fact. Mrs. Vance, I'm not asking to stay. Not asking for anything but the satisfaction of knowing I helped someone who needed it. You don't owe me conversation, don't owe me kindness, don't owe me a damn thing, except maybe the chance to prove I mean what I say. She studied his face, searching again for the lie, the hidden agenda, still found nothing but that steady, quiet certainty. All right, she said, and the word felt like stepping off a cliff. You can follow me home. They rode in silence, Eliza leading on her mare, Rowan following at a respectful distance with his 2 horses. The trail wound through scrub grass and sage, past rocky outcroppings where lizards sunned themselves and hawks circled high in the thermals. The land was beautiful in its harshness, unforgiving but honest. It demanded everything and promised nothing, which Eliza had learned to respect even when she couldn't love it. The sun was touching the horizon when her homestead came into view. A small cabin of weathered logs, a barn that listed slightly to one side, a chicken coop that held exactly 3 chickens, and the garden plot that had broken her heart more times than she could count. Smoke rose from the chimney in a thin gray line, which meant Eli had kept the fire going. Good boy. Always trying to help, even when help meant doing things a 7-year-old shouldn't have to manage alone. As they approached, the cabin door opened and Eli appeared, small and too thin, his dark hair falling into eyes that went wide at the sight of a stranger accompanying his mother. Mama? It's all right, baby. She dismounted, going to him quickly, kneeling so they were eye to eye. This is Mr. Cade. He's brought us some supplies. Eli looked past her to Rowan, who'd stopped his horses a respectful distance away and was making no move to approach. The boy's face held wariness beyond his years. He'd learned caution the hard way, watching his father die, watching his mother struggle, understanding too young that the world wasn't safe. Is he staying? Eli asked quietly. No, Eliza said. At the same moment, Rowan said, Not unless you want me to. They looked at each other over the boy's head. Something passed between them, not agreement exactly, but understanding. Mr. Cade is just dropping off the supplies, Eliza amended. Then he'll be on his way. But Rowan was already swinging down from his saddle, moving with that same unhurried purpose he'd shown in town. That pack horse is loaded pretty heavy, sis, he said. If it's all the same to you, I'd like to help get the supplies stored proper before I head out. Make sure nothing spoils or gets at by varmints. It was a reasonable request, practical, the kind of thing a decent person would offer, no hidden meaning behind it. All right, Eliza said, because refusing would have been churlish, and because part of her, the part that was tired of doing everything alone, wanted him to stay, at least long enough to see the supplies safely inside. What happened next unfolded with a quiet efficiency that surprised her. Rowan unpacked the supplies, 50 pounds of flour, bacon wrapped in paper, salt pork, coffee, dried beans, rice, even some sugar, and a small bag of peppermint sticks that made Eli's eyes go wide, and carried them into the cabin with Eli's help. The boy had been suspicious at first, hanging back near his mother, but curiosity won out when Rowan asked if he knew the best place to store the flour, where it would stay dry. Mama keeps it in the tin by the stove, Eli said, his voice small but helpful. Smart thinking. Rowan set the sack down where directed. Keeps the mice out too, I'd wager. We got lots of mice. Eli said it with the gravity of someone reporting a serious problem. Mama sets traps, but they keep coming back. Mice are persistent critters, but I might have something that could help with that. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small burlap sack that moved. Found this little one abandoned near my camp a couple weeks back. Been trying to figure out what to do with her. He opened the sack carefully, and a half-grown calico kitten poked its head out, mewing indignantly at the confinement. Eli's face transformed, from wary to delighted in the space of a heartbeat. A cat! She's a good mouser, from what I've seen. Keeps my camp clear. Rowan held the kitten out to the boy. But I travel light, and she deserves a proper home. Think you could give her one? Eli looked at his mother, hope and pleading written across his features in equal measure. Eliza should have said no, should have explained that they couldn't afford to feed another mouth, even a small one. But Eli was holding the kitten now, and the kitten was purring, and her son was smiling, actually smiling, for the first time in weeks. We'll manage, she heard herself say. The delight on Eli's face was worth whatever cost would come later. While Eli sat on the porch with the kitten, introducing her to the chickens who wanted nothing to do with her, Rowan helped Eliza organize the rest of the supplies. He worked without talking much, just moving with practiced efficiency, stacking things where they'd be useful, his presence filling the small cabin without overwhelming it. You didn't have to bring all this, Eliza said, because someone needed to say it out loud. I know. The kitten especially, that was... She stopped, not sure what word to use. Kind felt insufficient. Manipulative felt too harsh. He's a good boy, Rowan said simply. Deserves something to smile about. They finished in silence, the cabin growing darker as the sun finally dropped below the mountains. When the last of the supplies were stored, Rowan stepped back, looking around the small space with an expression Eliza couldn't quite read. You got a good setup here, he said. Solid cabin, good water source nearby. It's falling apart. She didn't know why she said it, why she felt compelled to puncture whatever pleasant illusion he was building. Some things just need fixing. Doesn't mean they're past saving. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning she wasn't ready to examine. Thank you, she said, because it needed saying, for all of this. It's more than... Her voice caught. It's more than anyone's done for us in a long time. You're welcome. He moved toward the door, reached for his hat. I should head out, get back to my camp before full dark. Where's your camp? North a ways, near the old quarry. She nodded, filing the information away without quite knowing why. Will you be staying in the area? For a while, got some business to take care of. He paused at the door, his hand on the frame. If you need anything, more supplies, help with repairs, anything at all, you can find me there. It wasn't quite an offer, not quite a promise, something carefully neutral that she could accept or ignore as she chose. I'll remember that, she said. He tipped his hat to her, called a good night to Eli that was warmly returned, and mounted his buckskin in one smooth motion. She watched from the doorway as he rode back the way they'd come, his silhouette growing smaller against the darkening sky until finally the distance swallowed him completely. Eli came to stand beside her, the kitten draped across his shoulders like a warm, purring scarf. I like him, the boy said. You don't know him. I like him anyway. Eli looked up at her with James's eyes. Don't you? Did she? Eliza didn't know. Didn't trust the flutter of something that might have been hope taking root in her chest, because hope was dangerous out here. Hope made you careless, made you believe in things that could hurt you when they proved false. But she'd believed enough to let Rowan Cade into her home, believed enough to accept his help. And now her pantry held food that would keep them alive for weeks, and her son held a kitten that had brought him joy. And somewhere in the gathering darkness, a stranger rode toward a camp she could find if she needed to, if she chose to. Come on, she said to Eli, ruffling his hair. Let's get some supper started. We've got flour now, real flour. They made biscuits that night, the first proper meal they'd had in longer than Eliza wanted to admit. Eli ate 3 of them, the kitten curled in his lap, and for the first time in months, the cabin felt less like a place they were simply surviving, and more like something that might, possibly, someday, become a home again. Later, after Eli had fallen asleep with the kitten tucked against his chest, Eliza stood at the window looking out at the star-scattered sky. The night was cool, clean, full of the sounds of the country settling in for sleep. Crickets, the distant yip of coyotes, the soft rustle of wind through grass. She thought about Rowan Cade's hands, scarred and capable. Thought about his eyes, direct and honest. Thought about the way he'd given her supplies without making her feel small for needing them. The way he'd smiled at Eli without patronizing. The way he'd left when he said he would without angling for more. She thought about trust and what it cost, and whether she could afford to pay that price again. Then she pulled the curtain closed, banked the fire, and went to bed. Tomorrow would come whether she was ready for it or not. The land would still need working, the animals would still need tending, and she would still be alone except for a 7-year-old boy and a half-grown cat. But tonight they had full bellies and a warm cabin and the small, fragile possibility that maybe, just maybe, she'd made the right choice in accepting help from a stranger who'd asked for nothing in return. The question was whether that stranger would prove to be what he seemed, or whether kindness, like everything else out here, came with a price that would be demanded when she could least afford to pay it. Only time would tell. And time, Eliza had learned, was rarely on her side. 3 days passed before Eliza saw Rowan Cade again, and in those 3 days she convinced herself she wouldn't. Men like that, helpful, decent, asking for nothing, they didn't exist in her experience. They were stories women told themselves to make loneliness bearable, fantasies that dissolved the moment you looked at them too hard. But on the 4th morning, when she was outside trying to reinforce the chicken coop's sagging fence with wire that kept snapping in her hands, she heard hoofbeats approaching from the north trail. She didn't look up right away. Kept working the wire through the post, her fingers raw and bleeding slightly where the metal had bitten into her palm. That wire's too thin for what you're trying to do. His voice. She'd recognize it now, that low, unhurried cadence that somehow didn't sound like pity, even when he was pointing out her mistakes. Eliza straightened, brushing hair from her face with the back of her wrist, leaving a smear of dirt across her cheek she didn't notice. Rowan sat astride his buckskin, a coil of thicker wire looped over his saddle horn. "Happen to have extra," he said, before she could ask. "Thought you might could use it." "You just happen to have wire." "I did." "And you just happened to be riding past my homestead." Something that might have been amusement touched his mouth. "Trail runs this way. Not much happening for coincidence." She should have been irritated by his deflection, but instead she found herself fighting a smile. "The trail runs half a mile east of here, Mr. Cade." "Does it?" He dismounted, untying the wire. "Must have taken a wrong turn." "Must have." He brought the wire over, and she noticed he moved differently than most men she'd known. No wasted motion, no performance of strength, just efficiency born from doing things until they became second nature. "May I?" He gestured toward her work. Eliza stepped back, watching as he examined the post she'd been wrestling with. His hands moved over the wood, testing stability, checking for rot. Professional assessment, not judgment. "Post solid enough, he said. "But you'll need to sink it deeper. Ground's too loose here. First strong wind and the whole section will pull free." "I know that." It came out sharper than she intended. "I just don't have the tools to—" "I do." He walked back to his horse, pulled a spade from where it hung alongside his bedroll. "Won't take long to reset it proper." This was the moment, Eliza knew, where she should refuse. Should thank him for the wire and send him on his way before this became something more than charity, before patterns formed that would be hard to break. But the fence needed fixing, and Eli needed the eggs those chickens provided, and Pride wouldn't feed her son or keep predators out. "All right," she said, "but I'm helping." They worked in silence at first, Rowan digging out around the post while Eliza cleared away stones and roots. The morning sun climbed higher, turning warm, and she noticed he'd rolled his sleeves to his elbows, revealing forearms marked with old scars, some thin and white, others darker, raised. The kind of scars that came from hard living, not accidents. "You always travel with fence supplies?" she asked, because the silence was starting to feel heavy. "Tools, mostly. Never know what you'll need." "That's a lot to carry. Light enough when you're used to it." He glanced at her. "Your husband, he build this coop?" The question landed like a stone in still water. Yes. Did good work. Foundation sound. James was good at building things. Past tense. Was. The words still hurt to say. Not as good at staying alive, apparently. She hadn't meant to say that last part. It slipped out bitter and raw, and she immediately regretted it. But Rowan just nodded, like he understood that grief sometimes came out as anger, because anger was easier to hold than sorrow. How long's he been gone? 14 months? Accident with the wagon, spooked horses, bad road. She drove her spade into the dirt harder than necessary. Took him 3 days to die. Nothing I could do but watch. I'm sorry. Everyone's sorry, doesn't change anything. He was quiet for a moment, then said, No, it doesn't. They returned to work, the rhythm of digging almost meditative. Eliza found herself sneaking glances at him when she thought he wasn't looking, taking in the set of his shoulders, the way he moved, the careful competence in everything he did. He wasn't handsome in any conventional sense. His face was too weathered, his nose slightly crooked like it had been broken and healed wrong. But there was something solid about him, something that suggested reliability in a way James never had. She hated herself a little for thinking it. There. Rowan stepped back, examining the reset post. That should hold now. Let me get the wire strung and you'll be set. I can do the wire myself. I know you can, but I'm here so you don't have to. It was such a simple statement, devoid of ego or expectation, that it disarmed her completely. She watched as he strung the new wire, his hands quick and sure, pulling it taut and securing it with practiced ease. The whole job took maybe 20 minutes, work that would have taken her hours of frustration and bleeding fingers. When he finished, he stepped back and gestured for her to inspect it. Check the tension. Make sure it's how you want it. Eliza tested the wire, firm, properly secured, the kind of work that would last seasons instead of weeks. It's good. Better than good. You need anything else done while I'm here? I noticed the barn doors hanging crooked. Mr. Cade. Rowan. He said it gently. If we're going to keep having this argument about me helping you, might as well use first names. We're not going to keep having this argument because you're not going to keep showing up uninvited to fix things. Am I uninvited? The question hung there, more loaded than it should have been. Eliza opened her mouth to say yes, to draw the line firmly and clearly, to protect herself from whatever this was becoming. Mama! Eli's voice came from the cabin, high and excited. Mama, come quick, Patches caught a mouse. Patches. The kitten had earned a name, apparently, which meant Eli had claimed her completely. Eliza felt Rowan watching her, waiting for her answer to his question. The barn door could use looking at, she heard herself say. If you have time. His smile was small but genuine. I've got time. They walked toward the barn, Eli running to meet them with the kitten proudly carrying a dead mouse that was nearly as big as her head. Look what she got! The boy was beaming. She's a real hunter, just like you said. Told you she was good at her job. Rowan crouched down to Eli's level, examining the kitten's prize with appropriate seriousness. That's a fine catch. Your mama won't have to worry about mice getting into the flour now. Can I keep her? Forever? Eliza's heart twisted at the question, at the underlying fear in it, that good things were temporary, that what was given could be taken away just as easily. She's yours, baby, Eliza said, for as long as she wants to stay. Eli threw his arms around the kitten, who tolerated the embrace with feline patience before squirming free to play with her mouse. The boy followed her, narrating her hunting prowess to no one in particular, lost in the kind of imaginative play that had been absent since James died. He's doing better, Rowan observed quietly. He's eating regular. That helps. More than that. He watched Eli chase the kitten around the yard. He's got some light back in him. It was true, and it hurt to acknowledge how much of that light she'd watched dim over the past months, how her own desperation had cast shadows over her son's childhood, stealing joy he should have been allowed to keep. The barn, she said, because she couldn't think about that right now without breaking. The barn door had come off its top hinge sometime during the spring storms, and she'd been propping it closed with a length of timber every night, which worked until it didn't. Rowan examined the hinge, the door frame, making small, thoughtful sounds as he worked out the problem. Hinge is cracked clean through. You'll need a new one. I don't have, but the bottom hinge is solid, and if we redistribute the weight. He trailed off, already working through solutions. I can rig something temporary that'll hold until you can get to town for parts. Won't be pretty, but it'll function. Temporary is all I need. He went to work, and Eliza found herself unable to walk away, unable to go back to her own chores and leave him to it. Instead, she stood in the barn doorway, watching his hands work, listening to the small sounds of effort and adjustment. "Why are you doing this?" she asked finally. "Fixing the door?" "All of it, the supplies, the fence. Now this. You said you wanted nothing, but people don't just—" She struggled for words. "Nobody does this without wanting something." Rowan paused, a nail held between his teeth while he positioned a piece of leather he was using to reinforce the hinge point. He removed the nail before answering. "You want the truth? I want to understand." He set down his tools, turned to face her fully. "I spent 2 years drifting after my father died, working odd jobs, moving town to town, not settling anywhere because settling meant putting down roots, and roots meant caring about something enough to stay. Told myself I was free. Really, I was just running." He picked up the hammer, turned it over in his hands. "About 8 months back, I was in a place not unlike Stillwater. Down to my last dollar, hadn't eaten in 2 days, too proud to ask for help. Man named George Patterson saw me eyeing the saloon's free lunch counter like I was planning to rob it. He bought me a meal, no questions asked. Then he offered me work. 2 weeks helping him build a barn. Fair wages, place to sleep, 3 meals a day. That was kind of him. It was, and it taught me something I'd forgotten while I was busy running." Rowan looked at her. "That kindness doesn't need a reason beyond seeing someone who needs it and being able to give it. George didn't want anything from me except honest work. And when those 2 weeks were up, he paid me what he'd promised and sent me off with enough supplies to last a month. So you're paying it forward. I'm trying to be the kind of man George Patterson thought I could be, the kind my father wanted me to be before stubbornness killed him." He went back to the hinge. "You don't have to understand it, Mrs. Vance. You just have to decide whether you can accept it." Eliza watched him work, processing this. The story rang true, too specific, too personal to be fabrication. But accepting it meant accepting vulnerability, meant admitting she needed help she couldn't repay, meant trusting that his kindness wouldn't eventually demand payment in forms she couldn't afford. "My name's Eliza," she said quietly. He glanced up and something shifted in his expression, a softening around the eyes, a hint of warmth. "Eliza." The way he said it made her name sound different somehow. Not fragile, not broken, just hers. "The door should hold now," he said, testing the swing. "But you'll want to get a proper hinge when you can. This is just stopgap. I'll add it to the list." Long list? Getting longer. She tried to make it sound light, failed. Rowan wiped his hands on his pants, gathering his tools. "I could come by in a few days. Help you work through some of it. You have your own work to do, your own life." "I do, but I've got time to spare." He paused. "Unless you'd rather I didn't." There it was again, that question, that choice being laid at her feet without pressure. She could say no, could thank him and send him away and return to managing alone. It would be safer that way, simpler. "There's a section of roof over the porch that's leaking," she heard herself say. "When it rains, water comes through onto the boards. They're starting to rot." "I could look at that." "And the well cover is cracked. Animals could fall in if it gives way completely. Should definitely fix that." She met his eyes. "Why does it feel like I'm making a mistake?" "Because the last time you trusted someone, it didn't end well." He said it without judgment, just observation. "But Eliza, not everyone's going to let you down. Some of us actually mean what we say." "How do I know you're one of those people?" "You don't. Not yet." He shouldered his tool bag. "But I'm willing to prove it if you're willing to give me the chance." Before she could answer, Eli came running over, the kitten bouncing along behind him. "Are you staying for supper?" the boy asked Rowan hopefully. "Eli—" Eliza started. I wasn't planning on it, Rowan said, but that's mighty kind of you to offer. Mama makes good biscuits now, since you brought the flour. Eli looked between them with the uncomplicated hope of a child who hadn't learned yet that good things often disappeared. Please? Eliza felt trapped between her son's pleading eyes and Rowan's careful neutrality, between the desire to protect herself and the reality that Eli had already decided to trust this man completely. It's just biscuits, she said finally. Nothing fancy. Biscuits sound perfect, Rowan replied. They ended up at the small table in the cabin as evening settled in, the lamp casting warm light over the simple meal. Biscuits, beans from the supplies Rowan had brought, some of the bacon fried crisp the way Eli liked it. It wasn't much, but it was more than they'd had in months, and the boy ate with an appetite that still surprised her after weeks of watching him pick at inadequate portions. Rowan ate quietly, complimenting the food without making it into something it wasn't, telling Eli a story about a horse he'd once trained who was afraid of chickens. The boy laughed, actually laughed, and the sound filled the small cabin with something Eliza hadn't realized was missing. She watched them together, this rough-edged stranger and her son, and felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crack. Rowan was good with Eli, not patronizing, not trying too hard, just treating him like a person worth talking to. And Eli responded to it, opening up in ways he hadn't since James died. Your pa teach you to ride? Rowan asked the boy. A little, before he died. Eli's face fell slightly. I wasn't very good at it. How old were you? 5. Well, 5's pretty young to expect mastery. I fell off my first horse about 20 times before I figured out the trick of staying on. Really? Eli's eyes widened. Really? Bruised my pride more than my backside, but eventually I learned. He glanced at Eliza. Your mama know how to ride? I can manage, Eliza said. Not well, but well enough. Maybe sometime I could give you both some pointers, if you wanted. I want to, Eli said immediately. We'll see, Eliza hedged, not ready to commit to future visits, future obligations, future disappointments. After supper, while Eliza cleaned the dishes, Rowan and Eli went outside to check on the chickens one last time before full dark. She watched through the window as Rowan showed the boy how to check for eggs properly, how to move slowly so as not to spook the birds. Patient instruction, the kind James had always promised to give, but never quite got around to before he died. She was still watching when Rowan glanced toward the window and caught her looking. Their eyes met through the glass, and for a moment neither looked away. Then Eli said something that made Rowan laugh, and the moment broke. By the time they came back inside, Eliza had schooled her expression into something neutral, safe. I should head out, Rowan said, reaching for his hat. Getting late. Will you come back? Eli asked. To fix the roof? If your mama wants me to. Both of them looked at her, waiting. Eliza felt the weight of the decision, understanding it was bigger than roof repairs or well covers, that she was choosing whether to let this man into their lives in ways that would be hard to undo. Thursday, she said. If you're free, we can tackle the porch roof. Rowan's smile was subtle but unmistakable. Thursday works. He said his goodnights, mounted his buckskin, and rode off into the darkness. Eliza stood in the doorway long after he'd gone, Eli beside her, both of them quiet. I really like him, Mama, Eli said softly. I know, baby. Do you? She didn't answer right away, not sure how to explain the complicated tangle of fear and hope and cautious wanting that Rowan Cade had stirred up in her. Finally, she said, I think he's a good man. But? Too smart, her boy. Too observant. But good men can still leave, Eli, can still disappoint us, can still die? The word hung in the air between them, blunt and terrible. Yes, she said. Die. Eli was quiet for a moment, then said, But he's not dead now. He's coming back Thursday. Such simple logic, such uncomplicated faith. Eliza envied it. Yes, she agreed. He's coming back Thursday. She just hoped she wouldn't regret letting him. Thursday came with clouds building on the horizon, the kind of heavy gray that promised rain before nightfall. Eliza spent the morning in a state of nervous energy, cleaning things that didn't need cleaning, reorganizing supplies that were already organized, trying not to watch the trail for signs of an approaching rider. He might not come. Something could have come up, changed his plans, made Thursday impossible. It would be better if he didn't come, really. Safer for all of them if this ended now, before it became something she'd have to untangle herself from later. But at mid-morning she heard hoofbeats, and when she looked out the window, her heart did something complicated and unwelcome in her chest. He'd come. Rowan arrived with a pack horse again, this one loaded with lumber and tools. He dismounted, tipped his hat to her, and got straight to work examining the porch roof without waiting for invitation or instruction. "Damage is worse than I thought," he called down from where he'd climbed up to inspect. "These boards are rotted through. You're lucky the whole thing hasn't collapsed." "How lucky?" Eliza said dryly. He climbed down, dusting his hands off. "I brought replacement boards. Should have enough to patch the worst of it, but this whole section will need rebuilding eventually. I can't afford—" "I'm not asking you to." He said it firmly but not unkindly. "Consider it an investment in keeping your porch from caving in while someone's standing on it. That someone being me. Being anyone. Safety doesn't pick favorites." They worked through the morning, Rowan on the roof while Eliza handed up tools and boards, Eli playing nearby with patches. The physical labor felt good, purposeful, and Eliza found herself falling into an easy rhythm with Rowan, anticipating what he'd need next, understanding his instructions before he finished giving them. "You're good at this," he observed, accepting a hammer from her. "I've had practice. James wasn't much for maintenance. I learned to do most of it myself." "He leave you alone often?" The question was casual, but she heard the weight behind it. "Often enough. He'd go into town, sometimes for days, said he was looking for work, making connections." She paused. "Mostly he was drinking and playing cards. That must have been hard." "It was what it was." She handed him another board. "Marriage isn't always what you think it's going to be." "No," Rowan agreed. "It isn't." Something in his tone made her look up. "You were married?" "Long time ago. Didn't last." He drove a nail with more force than necessary. "She wanted stability. I wanted adventure. Turns out you can't build a life on wanting different things." "What happened?" "She left. Found someone who could give her what I couldn't." He tested the board, ensuring it was secure. "Can't blame her for it. I wasn't ready to be the man she needed." "And now?" He looked down at her, his expression thoughtful. "Now I'm trying to figure out what kind of man I want to be, independent of what anyone else needs from me." The honesty of it disarmed her. Most men she'd known wore their past like armor, protecting themselves with silence or lies. But Rowan seemed willing to examine his failures without flinching from them. "That's brave," she said quietly. "Or stupid. Sometimes hard to tell the difference." They worked in companionable silence for a while, the clouds growing darker overhead. Around noon, Eliza went inside to make coffee and found herself humming, actually humming, while she worked. The realization stopped her cold. When had she last felt light enough to hum? She brought the coffee outside along with biscuits left from breakfast, and they took a break sitting on the porch steps, Eli between them, Patches asleep in the boy's lap. "Storm's coming," Rowan observed, looking at the sky. "Always is." He glanced at her. "You always this cheerful?" "Only on Thursdays." The corner of his mouth twitched. "What's special about Thursdays?" "That's when strange men show up to fix my roof." "Happens often, does it?" "You'd be surprised." He laughed, a real laugh, low and genuine, and she found herself smiling despite her better judgment. This was dangerous, this easy back and forth, this comfort that was starting to feel natural. Dangerous because it made her want things she'd convinced herself she didn't need. "Mama?" Eli said suddenly. "Can Rowan teach me to ride? He said he would." Eliza looked at Rowan, who shrugged. "Mentioned it might be useful. Boy should know how to handle a horse proper. He's 7. I was 6 when I learned. Younger's easier, less fear to overcome." She wanted to say no, to keep Eli close and safe where nothing could hurt him. But safe also meant limited. And what kind of life was that for a boy growing up in country where knowing how to ride could mean the difference between survival and tragedy? "Short lessons," she said finally, "and only if he listens to everything you tell him." I will! Eli bounced with excitement, disturbing Patches, who gave an indignant meow. I promise I'll listen. Then we'll start today, Rowan said, after I finish the roof. The afternoon passed in a blur of work and teaching. True to his word, Rowan finished the roof repairs, then brought Eli over to his buckskin and began showing him the basics: how to approach a horse, where to touch, how to read the animal's mood through the set of its ears and the tension in its muscles. Eliza watched from the porch, her hands busy mending a shirt that had torn weeks ago, her eyes on her son as he stood beside a horse that could kill him with one kick if it chose to. But Rowan's hands were steady on the reins, his voice calm and instructive, and the buckskin seemed to understand it was carrying precious cargo, moving with exaggerated care. He's patient, a voice said, and Eliza nearly jumped. She hadn't heard anyone approach, but Mary Chen stood at the edge of the property, a basket over her arm. Mary ran the laundry in town with her husband, one of the few people who'd shown Eliza any kindness after James died. But they hadn't spoken in weeks. Eliza had been too ashamed to show her face much in Stillwater. Mary, Eliza set down her mending. I wasn't expecting. I know. I should have sent word. Mary came up onto the porch, settling beside her. But I wanted to see how you were managing. Heard some talk in town. What kind of talk? The kind about a stranger helping the widow Vance. People wondering what he wants, what you're giving him in return. Mary's expression was kind but concerned. Thought you should know folks are talking. Shame burned through Eliza, hot and familiar. Of course they were talking. Of course they'd turned Rowan's kindness into something sordid, something transactional. He's not. We're not. She couldn't find the words. I know. Mary patted her hand. I can see it plain as day, but you know how people are. They see what they expect to see. Let them talk. That's the spirit, though it might help if you came to town yourself sometimes. Let them see you're doing fine, that this isn't what they're making it out to be. Eliza watched Rowan lift Eli onto the saddle, his hands supporting the boy's small frame, his voice carrying instructions she couldn't quite hear. What if I don't know what this is? She said quietly. Mary followed her gaze. Then I'd say you're smart to be cautious. But Eliza, from where I'm sitting, it looks like a good man helping someone who needs it. And if it becomes something more, she shrugged. Would that be so terrible? Yes. The word came out harder than intended. Because men leave. They die or they wander, or they decide you're not worth the trouble. And I can't. Her voice cracked. I can't survive losing someone again, especially not if Eli's heart is wrapped up in it too. Oh, honey, Mary squeezed her hand. You can't protect yourself from loss by refusing to let anyone in. That's not living. That's just waiting to die. Before Eliza could respond, Rowan called out that the lesson was over, and Eli came running, his face flushed with excitement, talking rapidly about how he'd sat in the saddle, how the horse had walked 3 whole circuits around the yard, how Rowan said he was a natural. Mary stood, smoothing her skirts. I should go, just wanted to check on you. She leaned in close. But Eliza, don't let fear make your decisions for you. You deserve more than that. She left with a wave to Eli and a polite nod to Rowan, who'd come over to see who'd been visiting. Friend of yours? He asked. One of the few I have left. She seemed nice. She is. Eliza looked at him. She also said people in town are talking. About you. About us. Rowan's expression didn't change. Let them talk. Easy for you to say. You're not the widow they're calling a... She stopped, glancing at Eli, who was mercifully distracted by Patches. A what? Rowan's voice had gone quiet, dangerous. What are they calling you? Nothing I haven't heard before. That doesn't make it right. No, but it makes it reality. She crossed her arms. This is what happens when a woman accepts help from a man in a place like this. People assume, and their assumptions become truth, whether it's accurate or not. Then maybe we should give them something real to talk about. Her heart stopped. What? I'm saying maybe we stop pretending this is just about roof repairs and writing lessons. Maybe we acknowledge that I like being here, and you don't entirely hate having me around, and see where that goes. I don't... She couldn't breathe properly. Rowan, I can't or won't. Does it matter? He studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Yeah, it does. He picked up his tools, started gathering his things. I'm not asking for promises, Eliza. Not asking you to trust me with your whole heart right away, but I am asking for honesty. If you want me to stop coming around, say so. I'll respect it and leave you be. But if you're saying no because you're scared, that's different. Of course I'm scared. The words burst out before she could stop them. I'm terrified because Eli's already attached to you, and I'm... She stopped, the admission catching in her throat. You're what? She looked away, unable to meet his eyes. I'm starting to depend on you, and that's dangerous. Why? Because everyone I've ever depended on has left, one way or another. Rowan set down his tools, closed the distance between them until he was standing close enough that she could see the silver threading through his dark hair, close enough to see the sincerity in his gray eyes. I'm not everyone else, he said quietly, and I'm not going anywhere unless you tell me to. You can't promise that. You're right. I can't promise I'll live forever or that nothing will ever go wrong, but I can promise that as long as I'm breathing, as long as you'll have me, I'll show up. I'll do the work. I'll be the kind of man worth depending on. He paused. That enough for you? It should have been. It was more than most men offered, but fear had its claws in her deep, and letting go felt like stepping off a cliff with no certainty of what waited below. I don't know, she whispered. Then figure it out. I'll be around. He finished gathering his things, called a goodbye to Eli that the boy returned enthusiastically, and mounted his horse. But before he rode off, he looked back at her one more time. For what it's worth, he said, I think you're brave as hell. Just wish you could see it too. Then he was gone, leaving her standing on the newly repaired porch, her heart a tangled mess of want and fear and something that felt dangerously close to hope. That night, lying in bed with Eli asleep in the next room and Patches curled at her feet, Eliza stared at the ceiling and tried to make sense of what she was feeling, tried to separate what she wanted from what she was afraid of, what was real from what was just the desperate loneliness talking. She thought about Rowan's hands, careful and capable. Thought about the way he looked at her, not with pity but with something that felt like recognition, like he saw who she actually was instead of who circumstances had made her. Thought about how the cabin felt less empty when he was in it, how Eli smiled more, how she'd started humming again for the first time in over a year, and she thought about Mary's words. Don't let fear make your decisions for you. But fear was all she had left to protect herself. Take that away. And what was left? Just a woman who'd failed at marriage once already, who'd been widowed and broken and reduced to begging for flour in a general store while strangers watched. Just a woman trying to keep her son alive in country that didn't forgive weakness. Just a woman who maybe, possibly, was starting to believe that Rowan Cade might actually mean what he said. The thought terrified her more than anything else. Because if she let herself believe it, let herself trust it, and he proved her wrong, if he left or died or simply decided she wasn't worth the trouble, it would destroy her, would destroy Eli, would take the small, fragile pieces of life they'd managed to rebuild and shatter them beyond repair. But if he was telling the truth, then maybe she didn't have to do this alone anymore. Maybe Eli could have someone to teach him to ride and fix fences and be the steady male presence a boy needed. Maybe she could have someone to talk to in the evenings, someone to share the weight of survival with, someone who saw her as more than just a problem to be pitied. Maybe she could have a life again, instead of just existence. The maybe was what kept her awake until dawn, turning it over and over in her mind like a stone worn smooth by water. And when the sun finally rose on Friday morning, she still didn't have an answer. But she knew, with certainty that felt both freeing and terrifying, that she was going to have to find one soon. Because Rowan Cade had asked for honesty, and she owed him at least that much, even if the truth scared her more than any lie ever could. The answer came on Sunday, though not in any way Eliza expected. She woke to the sound of Eli coughing, wet, rattling coughs that shook his small frame and sent panic shooting through her veins. By the time she reached his bed, his skin was burning with fever, his eyes glassy and unfocused. "Mama," he whispered, "I don't feel good." Her hand shook as she felt his forehead, his neck, his chest. Too hot, far too hot. She'd seen fever take children before, watched it happen to the neighbor's daughter 2 winters ago, seen how fast it could turn from concerning to catastrophic. "It's all right, baby." She kept her voice steady even as terror clawed at her insides. "You're going to be fine." But she didn't know that. Didn't know anything except that her son was sick and she was alone, and the nearest doctor was in Stillwater, 5 miles away through country that was dangerous to cross in daylight, let alone in the pre-dawn darkness. She tried everything she could think of: cool cloths on his forehead, water to keep him hydrated, tea made from herbs James had once said helped with fever. Nothing worked. Eli's temperature climbed higher, his breathing grew more labored, and by mid-morning he was drifting in and out of consciousness, calling for his father in moments of delirium that broke her heart into pieces. Eliza knelt beside his bed, gripping his small hand, trying to will her own strength into his failing body. Patches sat at the foot of the bed, unusually quiet, as if the kitten understood something was terribly wrong. "Please," Eliza whispered to the empty room, to fate, to whatever force governed life and death in this unforgiving place. "Please don't take him. Not him. Take anything else, but not him." The room offered no answer except the sound of Eli's labored breathing. She was trying to decide if his condition was stable enough for her to risk leaving him to ride for the doctor when she heard hoofbeats outside. Fast, urgent hoofbeats that announced themselves with purpose rather than leisure. Eliza ran to the window and felt something break loose in her chest when she saw Rowan dismounting before his horse had fully stopped, his face set in lines of concern. She met him at the door. "Eli's sick." The words tumbled out. "Fever, bad cough. I don't know what to do. I've tried everything, and he's getting worse, and show me." His calm cut through her panic like a knife. She led him to Eli's room, watched as he knelt beside the bed, his hand gentle on the boy's forehead, his other hand checking the pulse at Eli's wrist. "How long's he been like this?" "Since dawn. Maybe before. I didn't check on him during the night." Rowan listened to Eli's breathing, his expression growing more serious. "Sounds like it's settling in his chest. Could be pneumonia starting." The word sent ice through her veins. Pneumonia killed children, killed adults, killed whole families if it spread far enough. "I need to get him to the doctor." Her voice cracked. "But I can't leave him alone long enough to ride to town, and I can't move him in this condition." "I'll go." Rowan was already standing. "You stay with him. Keep him cool, keep him hydrated. I'll bring the doctor back. It's Sunday. Doc Harrison might not be available. Might be. Then I'll make him available." The certainty in Rowan's voice left no room for argument. "I'll bring him back, Eliza. I promise." He was out the door before she could respond, moving with the kind of speed that came from understanding urgency. She heard him mount, heard the thunder of hooves as he pushed his buckskin into a gallop, and then there was just silence and the sound of Eli's breathing and her own heartbeat loud in her ears. The wait was agony. She tried to focus on Eli, on changing the cool cloths, on getting small sips of water past his cracked lips. But her mind kept running ahead to worse possibilities. What if Rowan couldn't find the doctor? What if the doctor refused to come? What if Eli's fever climbed so high it damaged his brain or stopped his heart? Or... Stop. She forced the thoughts away. Rowan would come back. He'd promised, and despite all her fear and doubt, she believed him. She had to believe him. Because the alternative was facing this alone, and she couldn't. Not this. Not Eli. Time moved strangely. Minutes felt like hours. Hours compressed into moments. The sun climbed higher, then began its slow descent. Eli's fever spiked and broke and spiked again. Eliza sang to him. Old songs her mother had sung to her, silly rhymes that Eli used to laugh at when he was smaller. Her voice was hoarse and cracking, but she kept singing because stopping meant giving in to the fear, and she couldn't afford that. She was changing the cloth on his forehead for what felt like the 100th time when she heard hoofbeats again. Multiple horses this time, moving fast. Eliza ran to the door just as Rowan arrived with an older man she recognized as Dr. Harrison, medical bag in hand, his weathered face set in professional concern. Mrs. Vance, the doctor dismounted stiffly. Mr. Cade says your boy's quite ill. This way. She led them to Eli's room, stepping back to let the doctor work. Harrison examined Eli with practiced efficiency, listening to his chest, checking his eyes and throat, asking questions about symptoms and timing that Eliza answered as best she could through the haze of fear. Finally, the doctor sat back, his expression grave but not hopeless. It's pneumonia, early stages. Caught it soon enough that we can fight it, but it'll be rough for a few days. He pulled bottles from his bag, medicines Eliza couldn't have afforded, even if she'd known what to ask for. He'll need these 3 times a day. Keep the fever down with cool baths if it spikes above 103. And most importantly, keep him hydrated. Dehydration will kill faster than the infection at this point. I can do that. Eliza's voice was stronger now, steadied by having concrete tasks to focus on. I know you can. Harrison stood, gathering his things. I'll check on him again tomorrow. Meanwhile, if anything changes, if his breathing gets worse or he becomes unresponsive, send for me immediately. Doctor, I can't pay. We'll sort that out later. He waved off her concern. Right now, my job is keeping that boy alive. Everything else is just paperwork. He left instructions with Rowan while Eliza stayed with Eli, administering the first dose of medicine, watching anxiously as her son swallowed it with difficulty. When she finally emerged from the bedroom, the doctor was gone and Rowan was stoking the fire, preparing to brew coffee. You came back. The words sounded stupid even as she said them, but they needed saying. I told you I would. You found the doctor on a Sunday. That couldn't have been easy. It wasn't. Rowan set the coffee pot on the stove. He was at the church service. Had to interrupt the sermon to get his attention. Don't think Reverend Miller appreciated it much. Despite everything, Eliza almost smiled at the image. You interrupted Sunday service. Boy was dying. Figured the Reverend would understand. He paused. And if he didn't, that was his problem, not mine. The simple pragmatism of it, the complete absence of apology or doubt, made something shift in Eliza's chest. This man had ridden hard to get help for a boy who wasn't his son, had disrupted an entire church service without hesitation, had brought a doctor back and was now making coffee in her kitchen like it was the most natural thing in the world. Thank you. The words felt inadequate for what he'd done, but they were all she had. Don't thank me yet. He's got a long fight ahead. But he has a fight. Because of you. She moved closer, suddenly needing him to understand. If you hadn't come when you did, if you hadn't brought the doctor, but I did, so we don't have to think about the alternative. They stood in the small kitchen, the coffee beginning to boil, the light from the fire casting shadows on the walls. Eliza felt something break inside her, some final wall she'd been holding up against him, against trust, against the possibility that maybe this man was exactly who he appeared to be. Why did you come today? She asked quietly. How did you know? I didn't, just had a feeling something was off. Woke up this morning with this. He struggled for words. This pull, like I needed to check on you both. Tried to ignore it, went about my business, but it wouldn't let go. So I saddled up and rode over. He looked at her. Call it instinct or luck. Doesn't matter much either way. But it did matter. It mattered that he'd listened to that instinct, that he'd acted on concern for people who were barely more than strangers to him, that he'd dropped everything to help without counting the cost. Rowan, she stopped, not sure how to say what needed saying. That day you asked me what I wanted, asked me to be honest. I remember. I was scared. Still am, if I'm being truthful. But watching you today, seeing you ride off to get help when you didn't have to, when you could have just... Her voice caught. I think I've been so focused on protecting myself from being hurt that I forgot what it feels like to be cared for. He didn't move, didn't speak, just waited for her to find the words. I can't promise I won't be difficult, she continued. Can't promise I won't push you away when fear gets the better of me. But I can promise I'll try. Try to trust this. Try to believe you mean what you say. That's all I'm asking. Is it? She met his eyes. Because it feels like you're asking for more than that. Feels like you're asking me to let you into our lives in ways that can't be easily undone. Maybe I am. He moved closer, close enough that she could see the exhaustion around his eyes, the evidence that he had ridden hard and fast for hours without complaint. Because, Eliza, I'm not interested in halfway, not interested in being the man who shows up sometimes when it's convenient. If I'm going to be part of your life, I want to be part of it, really part of it. The good days and the bad, the easy moments and the hard ones. That's a lot to ask. I know. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and when she didn't, his hand came to rest on her shoulder, warm, solid, real. But I think you're worth asking. Think Eli deserves someone who will show up for him consistently. And I think I'm tired of drifting through a life that doesn't mean anything. His hand on her shoulder felt like an anchor in a storm she hadn't realized she was drowning in. Eliza closed her eyes, let herself lean into that steadiness for just a moment, let herself imagine what it might be like to share the weight instead of carrying it alone. All right, she whispered. All right? All right, you can stay. Not just today. Stay until we know Eli's through the worst. The admission was hard but necessary. I need help, and I need it to be you. She felt rather than saw his smile. I can do that. They settled into a routine born of necessity. Rowan took over the outdoor chores, feeding animals, checking fences, keeping the fire supplied with wood. Eliza focused on Eli, administering medicine according to the doctor's strict schedule, monitoring his fever, forcing fluids past reluctant lips. The hours blurred together, marked only by medicine times and the slow rise and fall of Eli's chest. The first night was the worst. Eli's fever spiked to 104, sending Eliza into barely controlled panic. But Rowan was there, helping her move Eli to a cool bath, holding the boy steady when his shivers turned violent, his voice calm and reassuring when Eliza's threatened to break. He's strong, Rowan said as they dried Eli off and got him back into bed. Takes after his mama that way. I don't feel strong. Strong people rarely do. They're too busy surviving to notice. By dawn, the fever had dropped to 101, and Eli was sleeping more peacefully. Eliza finally let herself rest, collapsing into the chair beside his bed, her head falling forward in exhaustion. She woke to find a blanket draped over her shoulders and the smell of coffee coming from the kitchen. Morning light filtered through the window, gentler than she remembered it being. She checked Eli, still sleeping, breathing easier, his color better than it had been. In the kitchen, Rowan had breakfast waiting. Nothing fancy, just eggs and bacon and biscuits, but it was hot and ready, and she hadn't had to make it herself. You didn't have to cook, she said, sitting down at the table with a gratitude that went bone deep. You need to eat. Can't take care of him if you collapse from hunger. They ate in comfortable silence, the kind that came from shared purpose rather than lack of words. Eliza found herself studying him in the morning light, the lines around his eyes, the silver in his hair, the way his hands moved with casual competence, even doing something as simple as buttering bread. What are you thinking? He asked, catching her watching. That I misjudged you when we first met. How so? I thought you were too good to be true. Thought there had to be some catch, some hidden price I'd pay later. She took a sip of coffee. Turns out you're just good, and that's harder to accept than any lie would have been. I'm not that good, Eliza. I've got my share of mistakes and regrets. But you're here. Despite all my suspicion and resistance, you're here. That counts for something. It counts for everything, he said quietly. Dr. Harrison came by that afternoon as promised, examining Eli with the same thorough professionalism. His verdict was cautiously optimistic. The fever was breaking, the lungs were clearing, the medicine was working. But he warned against complacency, insisted Eli needed at least another week of treatment and careful monitoring. You're doing good work, Mrs. Vance, the doctor said as he packed his bag. Keep it up and he'll pull through fine. We're doing good work, Eliza corrected, glancing at Rowan, who stood in the doorway. I couldn't manage this alone. Harrison looked between them, his expression knowing but not judgmental. Well then, lucky for the boy you don't have to. After the doctor left, Eliza returned to Eli's room to find him awake, his eyes clearer than they'd been in days. Mama? His voice was hoarse but coherent. What happened? You got sick, baby, real sick. But you're getting better now. Is Rowan here? The question made her throat tight. He is. He's been helping take care of you. Can I see him? She called Rowan in, watched as the big man knelt beside the bed with surprising gentleness. Hey there, partner, Rowan said. How you feeling? Tired, and my chest hurts. That'll get better. You just need to rest and take your medicine and mind your mama. Okay. Eli's eyes were already drifting closed again. Rowan, will you still teach me to ride when I'm better? Count on it. Promise? Rowan glanced at Eliza, something unspoken passing between them. I promise. Eli smiled, satisfied, and slipped back into healing sleep. Outside the room, Eliza caught Rowan's arm before he could walk away. You promised him. I did. That's not something you can take back, not to a 7-year-old boy who's already lost his father. I know. He turned to face her fully. I wouldn't have said it if I didn't mean it. When I make a promise, Eliza, I keep it, especially to children who deserve better than disappointment. The certainty in his voice settled something in her chest. He's going to get attached to you, more than he already is. And that scares you, terrifies me, because if you leave, I'm not leaving. He said it with the same calm confidence he brought to everything else. I told you before, I'm not going anywhere unless you tell me to. That includes staying through this, staying after this, staying for whatever comes next. What if I'm not ready for whatever comes next? Then we take it slow, but Eliza, you need to understand something. He stepped closer, his presence filling the small hallway. I'm not James. I'm not going to make promises I can't keep or leave you to manage alone or drink away our money while you struggle. I'm here because I want to be, because you and Eli matter to me, and because I'm done living half a life waiting for something better to come along. We're what's better? You're what's real. Everything else is just noise. She wanted to argue, to find holes in his logic, to protect herself from the vulnerability of believing him. But standing there in the dim hallway of her small cabin, with her son healing in the next room, and this man promising permanence she'd stopped believing existed, she found she didn't want to fight anymore. All right, she said again, and this time it felt less like surrender and more like choosing. All right, what? All right, stay. For as long as you want. For as long as this, she gestured between them, whatever this is, makes sense. What if it always makes sense? The question hung there, weighted with implications she wasn't ready to examine. Instead of answering, she did something she hadn't done since James died. She stepped forward and let herself be held. Rowan's arms came around her carefully, like he was holding something precious that might break, and she rested her forehead against his chest and just breathed. I'm scared, she whispered. I know. I don't know how to do this, how to trust someone again. We'll figure it out together. She let herself stay there for another moment, letting his steadiness seep into her bones, letting herself believe that maybe this could work. Then she stepped back, not because she wanted distance, but because Eli needed her, and there was still work to be done. The week that followed established a pattern that began to feel almost normal. Rowan stayed in the barn, insisted on it despite Eliza's offer of the main room's sofa, saying it was more proper and he'd slept in worse places. Every morning he'd appear with fresh wood for the fire and water from the well. They'd share breakfast, then divide tasks, Eliza tending to Eli while Rowan managed everything else. But it was more than just division of labor. It was the way Rowan would appear with coffee when Eliza hadn't realized she needed it. The way he'd sit with Eli in the evenings, telling stories that made the boy laugh, even when his chest still hurt. The way he'd catch Eliza's eye across the room and smile like they shared a secret the rest of the world didn't understand. It was the way the cabin began to feel less like a place she was barely surviving and more like a home where life was actually happening. By the end of the week, Eli was well enough to sit up and complain about being bored, which Dr. Harrison declared an excellent sign of recovery. The crisis had passed, and with it the immediate need for Rowan's constant presence. Eliza knew he'd leave now, return to his camp, to his own life, to the freedom of not being tied down to a widow and her child. She prepared herself for it, built up the walls she'd let crumble, readied herself to manage alone again. But when evening came and Eli was settled in bed, Rowan didn't make moves to pack his things. Instead, he found her on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains. "Thought you'd be heading out," she said, not looking at him. "Did you want me to?" "That's not—" She stopped. Honest. He'd asked for honest. "No, I don't want you to, but I assumed—" "You assumed I was only staying because Eli needed me. Didn't you?" He leaned against the porch rail, his silhouette dark against the fading light. "I stayed because you both needed me." "But that's not why I'm still here." "Then why?" "Because I don't want to leave. Because the last week, being here, being part of this—" He gestured at the homestead, the cabin, everything it represented. "It's the first time in years I've felt like I was where I was supposed to be." Eliza's heart was doing complicated things in her chest again. "Rowan, I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give," he interrupted. "Not asking to move into the cabin or change everything overnight, but I am asking if I can stay. Keep my camp where it is. Keep coming by to help with work. Keep being part of your lives in whatever way you're comfortable with." "Why?" The question came out smaller than she intended. "Why us? Why here?" He was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the land turning gold and purple in the dying light. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd heard it. "Because Eli reminds me what it means to believe good things can happen. And because you—" He turned to look at her. "Because you're the strongest person I've ever met, and you don't even know it. Because when I'm here, I'm not running anymore. I'm building something that matters. I'm not strong. I'm barely holding it together most days. That's what strong looks like, Eliza. It's not having all the answers or never being scared. It's getting up every morning and doing what needs doing even when you're terrified. It's protecting your son and working this land and surviving in a place that wants to break you." He paused. "It's letting someone help you even when everything in you says it's safer to refuse." She felt tears burning behind her eyes, but refused to let them fall. "If you stay, if we do this, it can't be charity. Can't be you constantly giving while I take. What are you offering?" "I don't know yet, but there has to be balance. Has to be something I bring to this beyond need. You bring plenty." His voice was firm. "You bring Eli, who makes me remember why trying matters. You bring honesty even when it's hard. You bring—" He stopped, seemed to reconsider his words. "You bring a reason to stay put that's more valuable than you know." The sun had nearly set now, the sky streaked with orange and red like something burning. Eliza looked at this man who'd appeared in her life when she needed him most, who'd proven himself over and over in ways both large and small, who was asking for nothing more than the chance to keep proving himself. "All right," she said for the third time, and this time it felt like a beginning rather than an ending. "Stay. Be part of this." "But Rowan—" She met his eyes. "If you're going to stay, you need to understand something. Eli's already calling you by name instead of Mr. Already looking for you first thing in the morning. If you decide later this isn't what you want, if you leave, it'll break his heart. I know." His expression was serious. "Which is why I'm not going to leave. Not unless you decide you can't trust me and send me away yourself. And if I do, if fear wins and I push you out, then I'll respect it. But Eliza, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure fear doesn't win, because you deserve more than a life ruled by what scares you." Before she could respond, Eli's voice called from inside, not distressed, just wanting his mother. Eliza moved toward the door, then paused. "Tomorrow," she said. "Come by tomorrow, early. There's fence work that needs doing, and I could use the help." Rowan's smile was like sunrise. "I'll be here." Marjim Otrisha. He was. And the day after that. A pattern forming that became routine, that became something neither of them named, but both understood was changing the shape of their lives. Winter was coming. Eliza could feel it in the bite of morning air, see it in the way the geese flew south in great calling formations. The land was preparing for hardship, and so was she. Except this year, for the first time since James died, she wasn't preparing alone. Rowan worked the homestead like it was his own, repairing everything that needed fixing and plenty she hadn't realized was broken. He brought supplies without fanfare, taught Eli to ride with patient persistence, and sat at her table in the evenings like he belonged there. And slowly, carefully, Eliza began to believe he did. But belief was a fragile thing, and winter in Wyoming was anything but gentle. The real test, she knew, was still coming. When the snow fell and the cold bit deep, and survival became the only thing that mattered, that's when she'd know if this thing between them was built to last. For now, though, she had this. A man who showed up, a son who smiled again, and a life that felt less like endurance and more like something worth living. It would have to be enough. Because hoping for more felt dangerous, and she'd been burned by hope before. But watching Rowan teach Eli to mend harness leather on the porch, while autumn's sun painted everything gold, she couldn't quite stop herself from hoping anyway. Even if it scared her, even if it might destroy her, even if tomorrow brought everything crashing down, today she had this moment of peace, and that was more than she'd had in longer than she could remember. So she held onto it with both hands and tried not to think about what winter might bring. Tried and failed, but tried nonetheless. Because that's what survival looked like. Moving forward even when you couldn't see the path, trusting your feet to find purchase even when the ground felt uncertain, believing that somewhere ahead there was solid earth worth reaching. And if Rowan Cade wanted to walk that uncertain path beside her, well, maybe she was brave enough, or foolish enough, to let him. Time would tell which it was. Winter announced itself with a vengeance the third week of November. Eliza woke to find the world transformed. 3 inches of snow blanketing everything, more falling in thick curtains that erased the horizon. The temperature had dropped 20 degrees overnight, and when she went to check the animals, the cold bit through her coat like teeth. The chickens huddled miserably in their coop. The horse stood with her back to the wind, and Patches refused to leave the cabin entirely, sitting at the window with her tail twitching in feline indignation at the weather. Rowan arrived before breakfast, covered in snow, leading his pack horse loaded with firewood and supplies. "Storm's going to get worse before it gets better," he said, stomping snow off his boots on the porch. "Brought enough wood to last you a week, maybe more if you're careful." "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did." He cut her off, not unkindly. "This is the kind of storm that kills people who aren't prepared, and you're not turning me away, so don't even try." She hadn't been planning to. The relief of seeing him was too overwhelming to hide behind pride. They spent the morning securing everything, bringing the chickens into the barn where it was warmer, making sure the horse had extra hay, stacking wood on the porch where they could reach it even if the snow got deeper. Eli helped where he could, his breath making clouds in the cold air, his cheeks pink with cold and excitement. "Is it going to snow forever?" the boy asked, watching the flakes fall with wide eyes. "Just feels that way sometimes," Rowan said. "But it'll stop eventually. Always does." By afternoon, the wind had picked up, driving the snow sideways, making visibility almost zero. Rowan came inside, shaking snow from his hair, his face serious. "I need to get back to my camp before this gets worse. Make sure my things are secured." Eliza felt panic flutter in her chest. "You're leaving?" "Just to my camp. I'll be back before dark." "Rowan, you can barely see 10 feet in this. If you get lost—" "I won't get lost. I know this country." But even as he said it, the wind howled louder, rattling the windows in their frames. "Don't go." The words came out before she could stop them. "Please, stay here. Your camp can wait until the storm breaks." He looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. "Eliza, I know it's not proper. I know people will talk, but I don't care." Her voice was steady now, certain. "I'm not sending you out in this. You can sleep in the barn, same as you've been doing when you stay over. But I'm not—" She stopped, swallowed hard. "I can't watch you ride out into that not knowing if you'll make it back." Rowan's face softened. "All right, I'll stay." The storm raged for 3 days. On the first day, they went through the motions of maintaining separation, Rowan in the barn, Eliza and Eli in the cabin. But by evening, when the temperature dropped so low that ice formed on the inside of the windows, Eliza called him in. "You'll freeze out there," she said when he hesitated at the door. "I've slept in worse cold." "But you don't have to." She stepped aside, making room. "There's the sofa. It's not much, but it's warmer than the barn. He looked at her, really looked at her, and she knew he understood what she was offering, not just shelter from the cold, but trust. The kind of trust that came from letting someone pass the final barriers into the space she'd protected so carefully. "Thank you," he said quietly, and came inside. That night they sat by the fire after Eli had gone to bed, the wind screaming outside, the cabin creaking under the assault but holding. Rowan had his knife out, carving something from a piece of scrap wood, his hands moving with the kind of absent skill that came from long practice. "What are you making?" Eliza asked from her chair. "Horse. For Eli. Figured he'd like it." She watched him work, watched the way the firelight caught the planes of his face, the concentration in his eyes. "You're good at that." "Had a lot of practice. Winters get long when you're alone. You don't talk about your past much. Not much to tell that's worth hearing." He didn't look up from his carving. "Grew up in Missouri. Father was a farmer, stubborn as they come. Mother died when I was 12. After that, it was just me and him, working land that didn't want to be worked." He paused, brushing away shavings. "He died trying to prove he could do everything himself. Wouldn't ask for help, wouldn't admit when he was beaten. Literally worked himself to death." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. He made his choice." Rowan tested the horse's legs, making small adjustments. "But I learned something from watching him kill himself with pride. Learned that there's a difference between strength and stubbornness, between independence and isolation." "Is that why you help people?" "Maybe. Or maybe I just got tired of being alone." He looked up at her then. "What about you? What brought you out here?" Eliza was quiet for a moment, staring into the fire. "James had dreams. Big dreams about owning land, making something of himself. I was young enough to believe him, stupid enough to think love would be enough to make it work." She laughed, but it was bitter. "Turns out love doesn't plant crops or pay debts or keep a man from drinking away what little money you have. You loved him, though, despite everything." "I did. In the beginning, at least. Later it was just—" She struggled for words. "Later it was just trying to keep things together for Eli's sake. Trying to make the best of a choice I couldn't undo." "Do you regret it? Coming out here?" "Sometimes. But then I look at Eli and think, if I hadn't come here, I wouldn't have him, and he's worth every moment of hardship." She paused. "What I regret is staying longer than I should have, believing things would change when all the evidence said they wouldn't." Rowan set down his knife, the wooden horse taking recognizable shape now. "You know what I see when I look at you?" "What?" "Someone who survived something that would have broken most people. Someone who kept going when giving up would have been easier. Someone who loves her son enough to put pride aside and accept help when she needs it." He met her eyes. "That's not weakness, Eliza. That's the strongest thing I've ever seen." She felt tears burning but refused to let them fall. "I don't feel strong." "No one does, but you are." The wind chose that moment to hit the cabin with particular force, making the whole structure shudder. Rowan stood, checking the door, the windows, making sure everything was secure. "It's holding," he said. "Your husband built solid. Whatever his other faults, he knew how to raise a cabin. One thing he was good at, I suppose." Rowan returned to his seat, picking up the carving again. They sat in comfortable silence, just the sound of the wind and the fire and the small scrape of knife against wood. Eliza found herself relaxed in a way she hadn't been since she couldn't remember when. Maybe ever. "Rowan?" she said quietly. "Yeah? Thank you for staying. For all of it." He smiled, small but genuine. "Nowhere else I'd rather be." And watching him carve a toy for her son while a blizzard tried to tear the world apart outside, Eliza believed him. The second day, the storm intensified. Snow piled against the cabin until they had to dig their way to the barn to check on the animals. The horse was fine, the chickens confused but safe. They worked quickly in the bitter cold, then retreated back inside where Eliza made coffee, and Rowan stoked the fire until the cabin felt almost warm. Eli was restless, cooped up and bored, so Rowan taught him card games and told stories about horses he'd trained and places he'd been. The boy soaked it up, asking endless questions, and Eliza watched the easy way they interacted. how Rowan never talked down to Eli, how he listened to the boys' rambling stories with genuine interest, how he'd ruffle Eli's hair absently like it was the most natural thing in the world, like he was family. The thought should have scared her. Instead, it felt inevitable, like something she'd been moving toward since the moment Rowan had stepped forward in Brennan's store and offered help. That evening, after Eli was asleep, Eliza and Rowan sat by the fire again. She was mending a shirt. He was putting finishing touches on the wooden horse. The domestic normalcy of it struck her. How easy it would be to mistake them for a married couple, settled and comfortable in their routines. "Can I ask you something?" Rowan said, breaking the silence. "Of course." "What are you afraid of? Really afraid of, I mean." The question caught her off guard. She set down her mending, considering. "Losing Eli. That's the biggest fear. Everything else is—" She paused. "Everything else is manageable compared to that. And with me? What scares you about letting me stay?" She'd known this conversation was coming eventually, had been preparing for it without realizing. "That you'll become essential, that Eli will love you, that I'll—" She stopped, the admission catching in her throat. "That you'll what?" "That I'll start to need you, really need you, not just for practical things, but for—" She gestured helplessly. "For everything. And then when you leave, it'll destroy us both." "What if I don't leave?" Everyone leaves eventually, one way or another." Rowan set down the carving, turned to face her fully. "Eliza, I understand why you think that. Your mother's gone. Your father, I'm guessing he's gone too, or you'd have gone to him instead of staying here alone. James died. Everyone you've counted on has disappeared." He leaned forward. "But I'm not everyone else. And I'm not making casual promises here." "Then what are you doing?" "I'm telling you that I want to stay. Not just through the winter, not just until spring comes and the land's easier to work. I want to be part of your life, part of Eli's life. I want to—" He stopped, seemed to gather courage. "I want to marry you, Eliza. Make this permanent, legal, real." The words landed like a physical blow. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what he just said. "You can't. We barely. It's only been—" "2 months," he finished. "I know, and I'm not saying we have to do it tomorrow. I'm saying that's where I'm headed, where I want this to go. And I needed you to know that so you can decide if you want the same thing." "Rowan, I can't. Marriage is—" She was floundering, drowning in the enormity of what he was offering. "Too much, too soon. I know." He held up his hands, backing off. "Forget I said anything. We can just—" "No." The word came out firm, surprising them both. "No, I'm not going to forget you said it because you—" She stood up, paced to the window, stared out at the wall of white. "Do you have any idea how terrifying that is? To have someone offer permanence when you've learned over and over that permanence doesn't exist? I know it's scary, but Eliza, isn't it more scary to live your whole life protecting yourself from risk? To survive but never actually live?" She turned to face him, and her voice when she spoke was raw. "I watched my husband die over 3 days. Watched him suffer and fade and finally go. And there wasn't a single thing I could do to stop it. That's what permanence gets you, the absolute certainty that you'll lose it eventually." "You're right. You will lose it. We all lose everything in the end." He stood, closed the distance between them. "But the alternative is spending every day alone, never letting anyone close enough to matter, dying without ever having really lived. And I've done that, Eliza. I've spent years drifting, keeping everyone at arm's length, telling myself I was fine. But I wasn't fine. I was just existing. And now? Now I'm here, with you and Eli, and for the first time in longer than I can remember, I feel alive, like what I do matters, like I matter, and I'll be damned if I'm going to walk away from that because the future's uncertain." Eliza felt something breaking open in her chest, something that had been locked tight for so long she'd forgotten it was there. Hope. Terrifying, dangerous hope that maybe this could work. Maybe he meant what he said. Maybe she could have this. "I'm a mess," she whispered. "I'm difficult and scared, and I'll push you away when fear gets the better of me. I know. And I can't promise I won't panic and ruin this. I know that too. Then why?" The question came out desperate. Why would you want to tie yourself to someone so broken? Rowan reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and when she didn't, his hand came to rest on her cheek. Because you're not broken, Eliza. You're just hurt, and hurt can heal if you let it. She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch, despite every instinct screaming at her to protect herself. I don't know how to do this. Neither do I. We'll figure it out together. And if we can't, then at least we tried. At least we didn't let fear make our choices for us. She opened her eyes, found him watching her with an expression so open, so vulnerable, that it took her breath away. This man, this strong, capable man, was handing her his heart and trusting she wouldn't destroy it. The least she could do was try to be brave enough to accept it. Ask me again, she said quietly. What? In the spring, when the snow melts and the land comes alive and we've survived winter together, ask me again about marriage. She swallowed hard. And I'll think about saying yes. His smile was like sunrise breaking over mountains. That's all I'm asking, a chance. You're getting more than that. You're getting, she gestured around the cabin. All of this, the mess and the fear and the 7-year-old who's going to ask you 1,000 questions every day. Are you sure that's what you want? More sure than I've been about anything. The wind howled outside, the fire crackled, and somewhere in the next room Eli slept peacefully, trusting that the adults would keep him safe through the storm. Eliza looked at Rowan Cade, really looked at him, and saw not just strength or kindness or reliability, but home. The kind of home that wasn't a place but a person, the kind you carried with you wherever you went. All right, she said, and it felt like the most important all right she'd ever spoken. We'll try this. Really try it. But Rowan, if you hurt my son, I won't. I swear to you, I won't. She believed him. Against all logic, against all experience, against every hard lesson she'd learned about trust and disappointment, she believed him. And that belief, fragile as it was, felt like the beginning of something that might actually last. The third day the storm began to break. The snow stopped falling, the wind died down, and weak sunlight filtered through the clouds. They dug their way outside to find the world transformed, everything buried under feet of white, the homestead barely recognizable under its blanket. Going to take days to dig out of this, Rowan observed, surveying the damage. Good thing I've got help then. He looked at her, and something in his expression made her heart flip over. Yeah, good thing. They spent the day digging paths to the barn, to the well, clearing snow from the porch and roof. Eli helped, throwing snowballs and making what he declared was a snow horse, though it looked more like a lumpy pile with sticks for legs. Patches ventured outside, took 3 steps into the deep snow, and retreated back to the cabin with an offended expression that made them all laugh. By evening, they were exhausted but satisfied. The animals were fed, the cabin was warm, and they'd proven they could survive what the land threw at them. After dinner, Rowan presented Eli with the carved horse. The boy's face lit up with such pure joy that Eliza felt tears prick her eyes. You made this for me? Eli turned the toy over in his hands, examining every detail. Figured you needed a horse of your own until you're big enough to ride alone. I love it. Eli threw his arms around Rowan's waist, hugging him fiercely. Thank you. Rowan's hand came up to rest on the boy's head, and when his eyes met Eliza's over Eli's shoulder, the expression there was so full of affection and purpose that she had to look away before she started crying for real. This was what family looked like. Not perfect, not without fear or doubt, but real. Solid. Worth fighting for. That night, after Eli was asleep clutching his wooden horse, Eliza found Rowan on the porch, looking out at the moonlit snow. Beautiful, isn't it? He said without turning. Deadly, you mean? That too, but still beautiful. He glanced at her. Most dangerous things are. She knew he wasn't just talking about the weather, knew he understood that what they were building was risky, that it could fail spectacularly, that she could hurt him, or he could hurt her, or the world could intervene in 1,000 different ways. But he was willing to risk it anyway. Move your things into the barn permanently, she said. The one by the cabin, not whatever temporary camp you've got out there. Set up properly. You'll need somewhere warm when you're here, and She took a breath. I want you here. Regularly, not just visiting. You're sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. He smiled, that quiet smile that transformed his whole face. Stubborn woman. You have no idea. I'm starting to get one. He turned to face her fully. Eliza, I need you to understand something. I'm not your husband. I'm not going to make you promises I can't keep or disappear when things get hard. When I commit to something, I see it through. Even when it's difficult? Especially then. Easy things don't need commitment. She studied him in the moonlight, this man who'd appeared in her life when she needed him most, who'd proven himself over and over in ways both large and small. I'm going to test that. Probably push you away more than once. I know, I'll stay anyway. Why? Because you're worth it, because Eli deserves stability, and because I've been running my whole life and I'm tired of it. He reached out, took her hand, the first time he'd initiated touch beyond the occasional supportive hand on her shoulder. I'm ready to stand still, Eliza. Right here, with you, if you'll let me. His hand was warm, solid, real. She laced her fingers through his and felt something settle in her chest. Not peace exactly, but the beginning of it. The possibility that maybe this could work. Maybe fear didn't have to win. Maybe she could be brave enough to choose hope over safety. All right, she whispered. Stay. Build your life here. Be part of ours. I will. They stood there in the cold, hands linked, looking out at the moonlit snow. And for the first time since James died, Eliza felt something other than fear when she thought about the future. She felt ready. The weeks that followed settled into a new rhythm. Rowan moved his essential supplies to the barn, though he kept his main camp intact, partly for propriety's sake, partly because he wasn't the kind of man who put all his possessions in one place until he was absolutely certain. But he came by every day, worked the land like it was his, shared meals with them, taught Eli everything from writing to basic carpentry to how to read weather in the clouds. The town noticed, of course. Mary Chen stopped by one afternoon with fresh bread and barely concealed curiosity. So she said, settling at Eliza's kitchen table while Eli played outside with Rowan. You and Mr. Cade. What about us? Oh, don't play coy with me. The whole town's talking about how he's practically living here. He's helping with the homestead. Nothing improper about that. Mary raised an eyebrow. Honey, I'm not judging. I'm asking if you're happy. The question caught Eliza off guard. Was she happy? She'd been so focused on survival, on managing fear, on protecting herself that she hadn't stopped to consider happiness. I think I might be, she said slowly, or at least, I think I'm heading toward it. Good, you deserve that. Mary squeezed her hand. Just be careful. People can be cruel when they don't understand something. Let them talk. I've survived worse than gossip. That's the spirit. Mary stood, gathering her things. But Eliza, if this is what you want, if he's what you want, don't let fear or propriety or what anyone else thinks stop you from claiming it. Life's too short to live it by other people's rules. After Mary left, Eliza stood at the window watching Rowan teach Eli to split wood, showing him how to read the grain, where to place the wedge, how to swing the maul safely. The boy was laughing, trying to mimic Rowan's movements, and when he finally split a piece successfully, Rowan's whoop of celebration made them both dissolve into laughter. This was what she wanted. Not the idea of it, not the safety of it, but this, real and messy and imperfect and utterly, completely right. That evening, after Eli was asleep, she found Rowan in the barn checking on the horse. We need to talk, she said. He turned, and for a moment she saw worry flash across his face. About what? About us. About what this is. All right. He set down the brush he'd been using, gave her his full attention. You asked me to marry you, asked me to think about it until spring. I remember. I've been thinking about it, and She took a breath, steadying herself. I don't want to wait until spring. I want... The words stuck in her throat, fear making them difficult to voice. What do you want, Eliza? I want to say yes, now. Not because I'm desperate or because I need help with the homestead, but because she forced herself to meet his eyes. Because I'm falling in love with you, and that terrifies me, but it's true. And I'd rather be terrified and honest than safe and alone. Rowan closed the distance between them in 3 strides, his hands coming up to frame her face. Say that again. Which part? The part about loving me. I'm falling in love with you, she repeated, stronger this time. Have been for weeks, probably. I just wouldn't let myself see it. His smile was radiant. I've been in love with you since the day you stood in Brennan's store and wouldn't let pride break you. Knew then you were the strongest person I'd ever meet. That's not love, it is love. And it got stronger every day after. Every time you pushed through fear to let me help, every time you chose trust over safety, every time you showed Eli what courage looks like. He shook his head. You're remarkable, Eliza, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of you if you'll let me. That's not how this works. I'm not some prize you have to. He kissed her, soft and careful and full of promise, like he was sealing a vow more sacred than any words could make it. And when she kissed him back, tentative at first, then with growing certainty, it felt like coming home after a long journey through hostile country. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Rowan rested his forehead against hers. Marry me, he said. Not someday. Not eventually. Marry me as soon as we can get to town and find someone to do it legal. The town will talk. Let them. Eli, we should tell him first. Make sure he'll be thrilled. You know he will. She did know. Eli had already started calling Rowan Pa when he thought no one was listening, had already claimed him as family in the way children did when they recognized safety. All right, she said, and this time the word felt like freedom. Yes, I'll marry you. His joy was uncomplicated, pure, and watching it transform his face made her heart feel too big for her chest. He picked her up and spun her around the barn until she was laughing and telling him to put her down before he dropped her. I need to do this right, he said, setting her on her feet. Need to ask Eli's blessing, need to get you a proper ring, I don't need a ring. I need you. That's all. You're getting both. His voice was firm. You deserve everything, Eliza, and I'm going to spend every day making sure you have it. They told Eli the next morning over breakfast. The boy looked between them, processing, and for a terrifying moment Eliza thought he might object, might feel like she was replacing James. Then his face broke into the biggest smile she'd seen since before his father died. Does this mean Rowan's staying forever? If that's all right with you, Rowan said seriously. It's more than all right. Eli launched himself at Rowan, hugging him fiercely. Can I call you Pa? Rowan's eyes met Eliza's over the boy's head, and she saw them shining with tears he was too proud to let fall. I'd be honored, Rowan said, his voice rough. And just like that, they became a family. Not by blood or law yet, but by choice. The kind of family forged in hardship and sealed with trust, imperfect and real and worth every moment of fear it had taken to build. They rode to town the following week, all 3 of them crowded onto Rowan's buckskin with Eli sitting in front, chattering excitedly about everything he saw. Eliza felt her stomach twist with nervousness as they approached Stillwater, knowing they'd face judgment, knowing people would talk, knowing Thomas Brennan would probably have opinions about the widow marrying so fast. But Rowan's arm was solid around her waist, and Eli's joy was infectious, and she'd survived worse than gossip. The clerk who did legal ceremonies was surprised but professional, asking questions about intent and soundness of mind and whether they understood the commitment they were making. Eliza answered honestly. Yes, she understood. Yes, she was certain. Yes, she was entering this freely. They signed the papers with Eli as witness, the boy so proud to write his name on the official document that he practiced 3 times on scratch paper first. And just like that, she was Eliza Cade. The name felt strange and right all at once. Another person's name, another person's future, but one she'd chosen freely instead of having chosen for her by circumstance and youth and naive hope. They stopped at Brennan's store on the way out of town, and Eliza felt her spine stiffen as they entered. But Thomas Brennan just looked at them, at Rowan's protective hand on her back, at Eli's obvious happiness, at the marriage certificate she was still holding, and nodded. "Mrs. Cade," he said, acknowledgement and acceptance both. "Mr. Cade, what can I do for you?" "We'll need supplies," Rowan said, "and we'll be paying cash." Brennan's eyebrows rose, but he just said, "Of course, let me know what you need." They left with flour and sugar and coffee and the small luxuries Eliza hadn't been able to afford in over a year. And when Rowan paid, actual money, not promises or credit, she felt the final weight of debt lift from her shoulders. She was free, not just of owing money, but of the fear and shame that had dogged her since James died. Free to build a new life with a man who'd proven himself worthy of trust, with a son who was smiling again, with a future that felt possible instead of impossible. The ride home was quiet, Eli dozing against Rowan's chest, the winter sun painting everything gold and white. Eliza leaned back against her husband, the words still strange but growing familiar, and let herself relax for the first time in longer than she could remember. "What are you thinking?" Rowan asked softly. "That I was wrong." "About what?" "About happiness being too dangerous to risk. About trust always ending in disappointment." She paused. "About being too broken to deserve good things." His arm tightened around her. "You were never broken, Eliza. Just surviving. There's a difference. I know that now, thanks to you. No, thanks to you. I just reminded you what you already were." They rode the rest of the way in comfortable silence, and when the cabin came into view, their cabin now, their home, Eliza felt something settle in her chest that she'd thought she'd lost forever. Peace. Not the absence of hardship or fear, but the presence of something stronger, love and trust, and the solid certainty that whatever came next, she wouldn't face it alone. That night, their first as husband and wife, Rowan moved his things from the barn into the cabin. Not into her room, not yet, that would come when they were both ready, but into the main space, marking his permanent presence in ways that made the cabin feel less empty and more full. After Eli was asleep, they sat by the fire, Rowan working on a new carving project, Eliza mending clothes. The domestic comfort of it was almost overwhelming. This was what marriage could be, she realized. Not grand gestures or perfect romance, but just this. Shared space, shared work, shared silence that felt companionable instead of lonely. "Rowan?" she said quietly. "Thank you for being patient with me, for not giving up when I pushed you away." He set down his carving, looked at her with those steady gray eyes. "I told you, you're worth the patience, worth the wait, worth everything." "I don't know how to be married to someone who actually means what they say. We'll figure it out, same way we figured everything else. Together." Together. The word felt like a promise and a comfort both. She'd spent so long doing everything alone that having a partner, a real partner who shared the weight instead of adding to it, felt almost miraculous. "I love you, Shah," she said, testing the words out loud, seeing how they felt in her mouth. His smile was gentle. "I love you too. Have since the beginning. Will until the end." And sitting there in the firelight with her new husband and her sleeping son, and a future that finally felt like something worth believing in, Eliza Cade let herself hope. Not the desperate hope of someone drowning who'd grasp at anything, but the solid hope of someone who'd survived the worst and discovered they were stronger for it. The kind of hope that could weather storms and setbacks and all the small disappointments that came with building a life. Because that's what they were doing, building something real and lasting from the broken pieces of their separate pasts. And if the foundation was trust instead of need, if the walls were made of choice instead of desperation, then maybe this house they were building could stand against whatever the world threw at it. Maybe it could even last. The thought didn't scare her anymore. It just felt like truth. Winter tested them in ways Eliza hadn't anticipated. It wasn't the cold or the snow or the physical hardship. They'd prepared for that, worked together to weather it. It was the closeness, the constant proximity of living in a small cabin with nowhere to retreat when emotions ran high or old wounds reopened. The first real fight came in late January. Eliza had been sorting through James's old clothes, deciding what could be salvaged and what needed burning, when she found a letter tucked in the pocket of his coat. It was from a woman in Stillwater, flowery handwriting, intimate words, dated 3 months before he died. She stood in the bedroom holding the letter, her hands shaking, feeling stupid and humiliated and furious all at once. James had been unfaithful, all those trips to town, all those days away. He'd been with someone else while she'd struggled to keep their homestead running, while she'd believed his lies about looking for work. Rowan found her sitting on the floor surrounded by James's belongings. The letter crumpled in her fist, tears streaming down her face. "Eliza?" He knelt beside her. "What happened?" She handed him the letter without speaking, watched his face darken as he read it. "That son of a—" He stopped himself, glancing toward where Eli played in the other room. "I'm sorry. You didn't deserve that." "Didn't I?" The words came out bitter. "Maybe I did. Maybe I wasn't enough, wasn't—" "Stop!" His voice was sharp enough to cut through her spiral. "Don't do that. Don't make his failings into your fault." "But what if—" "No." He took the letter from her hand, walked to the stove, and threw it in the fire. "What if nothing? He made choices, bad choices that hurt you. That's on him, not you." She wanted to believe him, wanted to let the anger burn away the shame, but years of James's subtle criticisms, his implications that she wasn't pretty enough or interesting enough or good enough, they'd left scars that didn't heal just because she wanted them to. "I should have known," she said quietly. "Should have seen it." "Why? Because you're supposed to be psychic?" Rowan sat beside her on the floor. "Eliza, you trusted your husband. That's not a failing. That's what marriage is supposed to be." "But I was stupid to trust him. You were human. There's a difference." She looked at him. This man who'd proven himself trustworthy over and over, and felt something break open inside her. Not grief for James exactly, but grief for the version of herself who'd believed in him, who'd thought love was enough to fix fundamental incompatibility. "I'm angry," she said, the admission surprising her. "I'm so angry at him for dying before I could tell him what I really thought of him, for leaving me with this mess, for—" Her voice cracked. "For making me feel like I wasn't enough when he was the one who wasn't enough." "Then be angry. You've earned it. You're not going to tell me to forgive him, to let it go? Why would I? He hurt you, betrayed you, left you to clean up his mistakes." Rowan's jaw was tight. "You don't owe him forgiveness. You don't owe him anything." The permission to be angry, really angry, without tempering it with understanding or excuses, was freeing in a way she hadn't expected. She let herself feel it, all of it, the rage and hurt and bitter disappointment of having wasted years on a man who'd never deserved her. And when the storm of emotion finally passed, leaving her drained and empty, Rowan was still there. Hadn't run, hadn't judged, hadn't tried to fix her or make it better with empty platitudes. He'd just stayed. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For not being him, for being—" She struggled for words. "For being you." His hand found hers, squeezed gently. "That's the easiest thing in the world, Eliza, being me with you." But the damage from that letter lingered. For days afterward, Eliza found herself watching Rowan, looking for signs of restlessness or dishonesty, waiting for him to prove he was no different than James. She knew it was unfair, knew he'd given her no reason to doubt him, but the fear was stronger than logic. He noticed, of course. Rowan noticed everything. "You're waiting for me to disappoint you," he said one evening after Eli had gone to bed. She wanted to deny it, but they'd promised honesty. "Yes, because of that letter. Because I'm scared I'm a terrible judge of character. Because I believed James when he lied, and what if I'm doing the same thing with you?" Rowan was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "You want to know where I go when I ride to town?" The question caught her off guard. "What?" "When I leave here, where do you think I go?" "What do you think I do?" I haven't." "You have. I can see it in the way you watch me leave, the relief when I come back." He stood, went to his coat, pulled out a small ledger. "Here, every penny I've spent in the last 3 months, every person I've talked to, every transaction I've made. You want to check up on me? Go ahead." She stared at the ledger, shame flooding through her. "I don't need to." "Yes, you do. Not because you don't trust me, but because James broke something in you that needs time to heal." He set the book on the table. So here's what we're going to do. Anytime you're scared, anytime doubt creeps in, you ask me, straight out. No hiding, no suffering in silence. You ask, and I'll answer truthfully, every single time. That's not fair to you. Fair doesn't matter. What matters is building trust, and trust takes time, especially when it's been shattered before. He moved closer. I'm not James. I won't ever be James. But I can't prove that by telling you. I have to prove it by showing you, day after day, until you believe it, bone deep. Eliza felt tears burning again, but these were different. Not grief or anger, but gratitude. I don't deserve you. You deserve better than me, but you're stuck with me anyway. He smiled, small and warm. And I'm stubborn enough to keep proving myself until you stop waiting for me to leave. That could take a while. I've got time. And he did prove it. Every day, in small ways and large, coming home when he said he would, accounting for his time without her asking, including her in decisions, showing Eli consistent affection, working the land like it was his own because it was, because they were building something together that belonged to all of them. Slowly, carefully, Eliza felt her walls coming down. Not all at once. Trust didn't work that way after it had been broken. But piece by piece, brick by brick, until one day she realized she was watching Rowan ride away to town and feeling only mild curiosity about his errand instead of gnawing anxiety. February brought a thaw that turned the snow to slush and the roads to mud. Rowan used the break in weather to make improvements to the homestead, repairing the barn's roof properly, building a better chicken coop, fixing the well cover that had been cracked for over a year. Eliza watched him work, marveling at the transformation of the place. What had been barely holding together was becoming solid, maintained, a homestead that looked lived in rather than survived in. "You're making it look almost respectable," she said one afternoon, bringing him coffee. It was always respectable, just needed some care. He accepted the cup gratefully. "This land's got good bones. Your husband knew what he was doing when he claimed it. Too bad he didn't know what he was doing with anything else." Rowan glanced at her. "You're talking about him differently now. Am I?" "Less angry, more resigned, I guess." She considered that. "I think I've stopped mourning who I thought he was and started accepting who he actually was. He wasn't evil, just selfish and weak and unable to be the man he'd promised to be." That's a kinder assessment than he probably deserved. Maybe, but carrying anger takes energy I'd rather spend on other things. She looked at the homestead, at the improvements Rowan had made, at the life they were building. "I'd rather focus on what I have instead of what I lost. And what do you have?" She met his eyes. "Everything that matters." That night, she moved her things into Rowan's room, or rather, they moved their things into what became their room. It felt like a final step, a final commitment to this marriage being real and permanent instead of just legal. Rowan was careful with her, patient in ways that made her heart ache. This was nothing like being with James, who'd taken what he wanted without thought for what she might need. Rowan asked, waited, paid attention to every response, and adjusted accordingly. Afterward, lying in the dark with his arm around her and his heartbeat steady under her ear, Eliza felt something click into place. This was what partnership looked like. Not one person serving another's needs, but both people caring for each other, building something together that was stronger than either could manage alone. "I love you," she said into the darkness. "I love you too." His hand stroked her hair absently. "Never get tired of hearing you say it. Even when I'm difficult? Especially then. Means you trust me enough to show me everything, not just the easy parts." She smiled against his chest. "You're getting way more than you bargained for." "I'm getting exactly what I wanted, a real life with a real person. Perfect would be boring." March roared in with wind that rattled the windows and rain that turned the yard to mud. But the cabin stayed warm, the animals stayed healthy, and Eli grew taller seemingly overnight, his face losing its baby roundness and taking on the angles of approaching boyhood. He'd stopped asking when Rowan was coming back, because Rowan was always there. Stopped calling him Rowan entirely and switched to Pa without anyone making a formal decision about it. The boy had simply claimed him as father, and Rowan had accepted the role with the same quiet certainty he brought to everything else. Watching them together, Rowan teaching Eli to read, showing him how to care for the horse, answering endless questions with patience that never seemed to wear thin, Eliza felt her last reservations crumble. This was what Eli needed. What she needed. A family built on choice and trust instead of accident and obligation. One evening in late March, Mary Chen stopped by with her husband Wei. They'd brought gifts, a quilt Mary had made, some tools Wei thought might be useful, and news from town. "People are talking about you two," Mary said over coffee. "Let me guess," Eliza said. "Nothing good." "Actually, they're impressed. Word is your homestead looks better than it has in years. Thomas Brennan said Rowan paid off all your debt in full, which made some folks reassess their opinions." Rowan shifted uncomfortably. "That wasn't meant to be public knowledge." "Nothing stays secret in Stillwater," Wei said with a slight smile. "But it speaks well of you, taking care of your family, honoring obligations." "She's my wife. Her debts became mine when we married." "Not every man would see it that way," Mary said pointedly. "Some would have let her struggle under the weight of what her first husband left behind." "Then those men are fools." Rowan's tone was matter-of-fact. "Partnership means sharing everything. Burdens and joys both." After the Chens left, Eliza confronted him about the debt. "You paid $15 you didn't owe," she said. "That was my responsibility." "It was our responsibility, and I had the money." "From what? You never said what you did before you came here." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "I worked as a foreman on a ranch in Montana for about 5 years. Saved most of what I earned because I had nothing to spend it on. When I left, I had enough to start over somewhere new." "Why did you leave?" "Because I was tired of working someone else's land. Wanted something of my own." He looked at her. "Found it here. Just not in the way I expected." "You could have bought your own place with that money." "Could have. But this place has you and Eli, and no amount of land is worth more than that." She studied him, this man who'd given up independence to tie himself to her complicated life, and felt something fierce and protective rise in her chest. "The money you spent on my debt, we'll pay you back. Somehow." "Eliza, it's our money now. Yours, mine, doesn't matter which pocket it comes from. It matters to me. I can't just take from you without what? Contributing?" He caught her hands. "You contribute every day. You manage this household. You raise Eli. You work the garden. You cook and clean and mend and 100 other things I wouldn't know how to do if my life depended on it. That's worth more than any money I spent paying off debt. That's what women do. And it's valuable. Don't diminish it." His voice was firm. "This idea that only paid work matters, that money is the only measure of contribution, it's nonsense. We're a team, Eliza. You do what you're good at, I do what I'm good at, and together we make this work. There's no scorekeeping in that." She wanted to argue, but the sincerity in his eyes stopped her. He really believed what he was saying, really saw her work as equal to his, her contributions as valuable as money. It was such a foreign concept that it took her a moment to accept it. "All right," she said finally. "But if I ever make you feel like you're doing all the providing, you tell me. Because partnership goes both ways." "Deal." April brought the first real signs of spring. The snow melted completely, revealing dead grass that would green up soon. The creek ran high and fast with runoff, and birds Eliza hadn't seen in months returned, filling the air with song. Rowan began preparing the garden plot, turning soil that had lain fallow the previous year, adding compost and planning what to plant. Eliza worked beside him, her hands in the dirt, planning a garden that would actually produce food instead of disappointment. "We could expand this," Rowan said, surveying the plot. "Double the size, maybe more. If we grow enough, we could sell surplus in town." "That's ambitious." "You saying you can't handle it?" She smiled. "I'm saying I like how you think." They planted together, potatoes and squash and beans and corn, carrots and cabbage and turnips. Eli helped, his small hands patting down soil, his questions endless. What would grow first? How long would it take? Could they plant pumpkins for fall? "We can plant whatever you want," Rowan told him, This is your garden too. Can we plant flowers for Mama? Rowan glanced at Eliza, something soft in his expression. That's a fine idea. What kind does your mama like? I don't know. Eli looked at her. Mama, what flowers do you like? She thought about it. James had never brought her flowers, never asked what she preferred, never seemed to think her opinions on such things mattered. Wildflowers, she said finally. The kind that grow whether you tend them or not. Survivors, Rowan said quietly, like you. They planted wildflower seeds along the edge of the garden, and Eli took responsibility for watering them, checking daily for signs of growth with the intense focus only children could maintain. By mid-April, the homestead had transformed. What had been barely surviving was now thriving. Animals healthy, buildings repaired, garden planted, everything organized and maintained. The change was so dramatic that when Dr. Harrison stopped by to check on how Eli was recovering from his bout with pneumonia months earlier, he barely recognized the place. Mrs. Cade, he said, looking around with barely concealed surprise. Your homestead looks remarkable. Thank you. My husband's been working hard. Both of you have, from what I can see. He examined Eli, pronounced him completely recovered, and accepted coffee before heading back to town. You know, when I first came out here to treat your boy, I wasn't sure either of you would make it through winter. I'm glad to be proven wrong. After he left, Rowan asked, do people really think we wouldn't survive? I think people thought I wouldn't survive, C.S., Eliza corrected. A widow alone with a sick child in a homestead falling apart, those aren't good odds in this country. Good thing you're not alone anymore. Good thing, she agreed. But survival wasn't enough anymore. She'd survived for 14 months after James died, kept breathing and moving and protecting Eli, but she'd been dying inside the whole time. Now, with Rowan, with the life they were building together, she wasn't just surviving. She was living, really living, in ways she hadn't since before she'd married James, maybe in ways she'd never lived at all. The realization should have terrified her. This much happiness, this much depending on one person, this much to lose if it all fell apart. But instead it felt like freedom, like she'd been holding her breath for years and could finally exhale. One evening in late April, with Eli asleep and the spring air soft through the open window, Eliza found Rowan on the porch carving something new. What is it this time? She asked, settling beside him. Bird, for Eli's collection. She smiled. Over the winter, Rowan had carved Eli a whole menagerie, horses and dogs and bears and deer, each one detailed and perfect. The boy treasured them, lined them up on his windowsill like soldiers standing guard. You're good to him, she said. Better than his actual father ever was. I am his actual father. Blood doesn't make family, Eliza. Choice does. Have you thought about making it legal? Adopting him? Rowan's hands stilled on the carving. You'd want that? I think he would, and She took a breath. I want him to have your name. Want people to know he's your son in every way that matters. Then we'll do it. He set down the carving, pulled her close. Whatever you want, whatever Eli needs, we'll make it happen. They filed the paperwork the following week. The judge who processed it looked at them over his spectacles and said, You understand this is permanent, Mr. Cade. You're taking legal responsibility for this boy for the rest of your life. I understand. That's what fathers do. Many men wouldn't, especially for another man's child. Then many men are missing out, Rowan said simply. Eli's a good boy. I'm lucky to be his father. The judge signed the papers, and just like that, Eli Vance became Eli Cade. When they told him that evening, the boy cried, not from sadness, but from joy so overwhelming he couldn't contain it. I'm really yours? He asked Rowan, needing confirmation. You were always mine. Now it's just official. Eli threw himself at Rowan, holding on like he'd never let go. And watching them, Eliza felt her heart expand with a kind of love she hadn't known existed. Not romantic love, but something deeper, fiercer, the love of watching her child have what he deserved, what she'd feared he'd never get. A father who chose him, who stayed, who proved every single day that love was action, not just words. May brought warm days and cool nights, perfect weather for growing things. The garden exploded with life, green shoots pushing through soil, growing taller every day, promising abundance after so much scarcity. Eliza worked the garden daily, weeding and watering and tending, but it didn't feel like burden the way it had before. With Rowan's help, with the knowledge that they'd actually harvest something this time, the work felt purposeful instead of futile. She was checking the potato plants one morning when Mary Chen arrived with news. "The town's organizing a spring dance," Mary said, settling on the porch with the coffee Eliza offered. "Next Saturday. Everyone's invited. I don't think you have to come. You and Rowan both. Let people see you're doing well. Let them see you're happy." Mary's expression turned serious. "Eliza, you've spent over a year hiding out here, avoiding town because you were ashamed of needing help. Time to show them you're not ashamed anymore. I'm not sure I'm ready for—" "You're ready. And even if you're not, you're going anyway." Mary stood. "I'll tell Thomas Brennan to expect you. Wear something pretty. Dance with your husband. Show Stillwater that Eliza Cade is done apologizing for surviving." After Mary left, Eliza found Rowan in the barn, told him about the dance. "We don't have to go if you're not comfortable," he said. "I'm not comfortable. But Mary's right. I've been hiding too long. Time to stop. Then we'll go. Together." The dance was held in the town hall, lanterns strung up, tables loaded with food people had brought to share. Eliza felt every eye on them when they entered. Rowan in his best shirt, Eliza in the only dress she owned that wasn't work-worn, Eli between them holding both their hands. The whispers started immediately, but Thomas Brennan crossed the room to shake Rowan's hand and tell Eliza she looked well, and that broke the ice. Soon others approached, some genuinely welcoming, others curious, all at least polite. When the music started, Rowan led Eliza to the dance floor. She'd forgotten how to dance, hadn't done it since before James died, but Rowan was patient, guiding her through steps until muscle memory took over. "People are staring," she murmured. "Let them. They're seeing a woman who survived losing everything and built it all back stronger." He spun her gently. "They're seeing what strength looks like." "I don't feel strong." "You never do. But Eliza, look what you've done. You've kept your son alive, kept your homestead running, let someone past your walls even when fear told you not to. You've built a life worth living from nothing but determination and courage." "Boor sarts." He pulled her closer. "That's strength. The real kind, not the performance kind." She looked up at him, this man who saw her more clearly than anyone ever had, and felt something settle in her chest. Not peace exactly, life was too uncertain for peace, but acceptance. Acceptance that she'd done her best, that she'd survived, that she deserved happiness even if fear whispered otherwise. "I love you," she said, loud enough for anyone nearby to hear, not caring who knew. His smile was radiant. "I love you too. Always will." They danced until Eli complained he was tired, then walked home through the spring darkness, Eli asleep on Rowan's shoulders, the stars brilliant overhead. And Eliza felt something she hadn't felt since before she could remember. Hope. Not desperate hope or fearful hope, but solid, grounded hope that tomorrow would be better than today, that they were building something that would last, that love and work and trust were enough to forge a life worth living. Summer arrived with heat and growth and abundance. The garden produced exactly as Rowan had predicted, more than they could use, enough to sell in town. Eliza found herself with money of her own for the first time in years, money she'd earned through her own work, and the independence of it was almost intoxicating. She bought Eli new clothes to replace the ones he'd outgrown, bought herself fabric to make a new dress, put the rest away, saving for winter, for emergencies, for the future they were building. Rowan watched her count her earnings one evening and smiled. "Feels good, doesn't it? Having something that's yours." "It does. But Rowan," she looked at him, "it's not just mine, it's ours. Everything we have, everything we've built, it belongs to both of us." "I know, but it's still important for you to have your own money, your own independence." He moved closer. "I never want you to feel trapped, like you have to stay because you can't afford to leave. I'm not leaving. I know, But knowing you could if you wanted to, that makes choosing to stay mean something. She understood what he was saying. The difference between staying because you had no choice and staying because you wanted to, it was everything. And Rowan, understanding that, giving her the freedom to choose, even knowing she'd choose him, made her love him even more. By August, the homestead was unrecognizable from what it had been a year earlier. Buildings solid, animals thriving, garden producing, everything maintained and cared for. They'd even expanded, bought 2 more chickens, a milk cow, started talking about acquiring more land if the opportunity arose. This was prosperity. Not wealth exactly, but security. The knowledge that they could survive winter, could weather hardship, could build a future instead of just enduring the present. One evening, sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold, Rowan said, "You ever think about what comes next?" "What do you mean?" "Eli's growing up. In a few years he'll need proper schooling, and this homestead, we could expand it, but that would mean more work, more risk." He paused. "I guess I'm asking what you want this life to look like in 5 years, 10 years. Eliza thought about it, really thought about it. A year ago, she couldn't have imagined beyond the next day, the next meal, the next crisis. But now, with stability beneath her feet and partnership beside her, she could actually envision a future. "I want Eli to have choices," she said finally. "Want him to be educated enough to do whatever he wants, stay here and work the land if that makes him happy, or leave and find his own path if that's what he needs. And for us? I want to grow old with you, want to build this place into something we're proud of, something we can pass on to Eli if he wants it. She stopped, the admission feeling too large for words. "What?" "I want to be happy, really, truly happy, not just surviving or managing. And I think," she looked at him, "I think I already am. For the first time in my adult life, I'm actually happy." Rowan took her hand, laced their fingers together. "Me too. Spent so many years drifting, convinced I was better off alone. Turns out I was just scared of failing at something that mattered. And now? Now I'm still scared sometimes, but being scared with you is better than being safe and alone." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky darken, the first stars appearing. Inside, Eli was doing his evening chores, feeding Patches, organizing his carved animals, preparing for bed. Normal, everyday things that added up to a life. This was what she'd fought for, Eliza realized. Not perfection, not absence of hardship, but this. A family built on choice and trust, a home that felt safe, a future that felt possible. It wasn't what she'd imagined when she was young and naive and thought love conquered everything. It was better. Because it was real, earned through hardship and fear, and the daily choice to keep trying even when giving up would have been easier. That night, lying in bed with Rowan asleep beside her and Eli safe in the next room, Eliza thought about the woman she'd been a year ago. Desperate, broken, convinced she'd never be anything more than a cautionary tale about widows who couldn't manage alone. That woman would barely recognize her now. Would be shocked by the confidence Eliza had built, the life she'd created, the love she'd allowed herself to accept. And if that woman could see her now, Eliza hoped she'd understand something important, that strength wasn't about never falling, never needing help, never admitting fear. Strength was getting up after you fell, accepting help when you needed it, feeling fear and choosing courage anyway. Strength was surviving the impossible and building something beautiful from the wreckage. September brought harvest time. They worked from dawn to dusk, bringing in crops, preserving food for winter, preparing for the cycle to begin again. But this year, unlike last year, Eliza worked with hope instead of desperation. This year they had abundance. This year they'd survive winter with full bellies and warm shelter and the knowledge that they'd done it together. On the last day of harvest, Rowan called Eliza and Eli to the edge of the property where he'd been working on something secret for weeks. "Close your eyes," he told Eliza. She obeyed, letting him guide her forward, Eli giggling beside her. "All right, open." She opened her eyes and found herself standing in front of a wooden sign mounted at the entrance to their property. Carved deep into the wood were the words, "Cade Family Homestead." Below it, in smaller letters, "Built on faith, trust, and stubborn hope." Tears blurred her vision. "Rowan, we're a family," he said simply. "Figured we should make it official." Eli was tracing the letters with his finger, sounding out the words, his face glowing with pride. "That's us. The Cade family." "That's us," Eliza agreed, her voice thick with emotion. She looked at the sign, at the homestead beyond it, at her husband and son standing in the golden afternoon light, and felt the last piece of her broken heart click into place. This was home. Not just the land or the buildings, but these people, this love, this life they'd built together from nothing but determination and the willingness to try. A year ago, she'd been turned away from a store, denied even a handful of flour, convinced she'd die alone with her son. Now she had abundance and family and a future that stretched out before her full of possibility. The journey between those 2 points hadn't been smooth, had involved fear and doubt and moments where giving up seemed easier than continuing. But she'd kept going, had chosen trust over safety, had let Rowan past her walls, had built something stronger than anything she could have managed alone. That evening, the three of them sat on the porch watching the sunset, Patches curled in Eli's lap, the carved animals lined up on the railing like guardians watching over their kingdom. The air was soft, full of the promise of autumn, and Eliza felt contentment settle over her like a blanket. "What are you thinking?" Rowan asked quietly. She considered the question. What was she thinking? About the past and how far she'd come, about the future and all it might hold, about the present and how precious it was. "I'm thinking about how I almost refused your help that day in town," she said finally. "How close I came to turning you away because I was too scared to trust." "But you didn't." "No, I didn't." She looked at him, and that choice, that one moment of choosing courage over fear, it changed everything. "You changed everything. I just reminded you what you were capable of." "We changed everything, she corrected. "Together." Eli yawned, leaning against Rowan's shoulder, his eyes drifting closed. The boy was exhausted from the day's work, satisfied in the way children were when they'd contributed something real and been recognized for it. "Time for bed, little man," Rowan said, scooping him up. "Can you tell me a story?" Eli mumbled, already half asleep. "What kind?" "The one about the widow and the stranger." Eliza's breath caught. "What story is that, baby?" "The one where Mama was sad and alone, and then Pa came and made everything better, and they all lived—" Another yawn. "They all lived happy." She met Rowan's eyes over their son's head, saw her own emotions reflected there, wonder and gratitude and fierce protective love. "That's a good story," Rowan said softly. "Want to hear how it ends?" "I know how it ends. They stay together forever and ever. Right, Mama?" Eliza thought about promises and certainty and all the ways life could derail even the best intentions. Thought about how she'd learned the hard way that nothing was guaranteed, that forever was a hope, not a certainty. But looking at her family, at the life they'd built, the trust they'd established, the love that had proven itself through hardship and fear, and all the small daily choices that added up to something lasting, she allowed herself to believe. "Right, baby," she said, "forever and ever." Because maybe forever wasn't about guarantees or absence of hardship. Maybe it was about choosing each other every single day, working through problems instead of running from them, building something strong enough to weather whatever storms came. Maybe forever was just another word for commitment, for showing up, for proving through action that love was more than a feeling. It was a choice you made over and over until it became who you were. And if that was what forever meant, then yes, they'd have it. Not because life would be easy or perfect or free from struggle, but because they'd proven they could face struggle together and come out stronger. Rowan carried Eli to bed while Eliza stood on the porch watching the last light fade from the sky. The homestead was quiet except for the sounds of evening, crickets singing, the soft rustle of wind through grass, the distant call of an owl beginning its nightly hunt. Peace. That's what this was. Not the absence of hardship, but the presence of something stronger. Love and trust, and the knowledge that whatever came next, she wouldn't face it alone. Rowan returned, slipping his arms around her waist from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. They stood like that for a long moment, just breathing together, watching their land settle into darkness. "Thank you," Eliza said quietly. "For what?" "For being stubborn enough not to give up on me. For proving that trust wasn't foolish, that hope wasn't naive, that building something real was possible even after everything I'd lost. You did the same for me, gave me a reason to stop running, to put down roots, to believe I could be more than just a drifter passing through. We saved each other then. We built something worth saving," he corrected, "together." She turned in his arms, looked up at his face in the starlight, and saw her future written there. Not perfect, not without challenges, but real and solid and worth every moment of fear it had taken to trust it. "I love you, she said. "I love you too." He kissed her forehead. "Always will, Eliza. That's a promise." And this time from this man, she believed it. They went inside together, banked the fire, checked on Eli one last time, the boy sleeping peacefully with Patches curled against his chest and his wooden animals standing guard on the windowsill. Everything was as it should be. Safe, secure, home. In bed, Rowan pulled her close, and she let herself relax completely. No fear, no waiting for disaster, just trust, pure and simple and hard-won. This was what she'd needed all along, Eliza realized. Not someone to rescue her, she'd rescued herself. Not someone to fix her, she'd never been broken, just damaged. What she'd needed was someone to stand beside her while she rebuilt, to believe in her when she couldn't believe in herself, to prove through consistent action that partnership was possible. And Rowan had been that person. Had shown up every single day, had kept every promise, had earned her trust one choice at a time, until fear no longer controlled her decisions. In return, she'd given him something equally valuable, a place to belong, a family to love, a purpose beyond survival. They'd healed each other not by fixing what was broken, but by choosing each other despite the damage, by building something new instead of trying to restore what was lost. That was the real lesson, she thought, as sleep began to claim her. You couldn't go back to who you were before trauma, before loss, before life taught you hard lessons. But you could go forward, could build something new from the pieces that remained, could choose hope over fear, trust over suspicion, love over safety. Could choose to live instead of just survive. And in choosing that, in choosing Rowan, choosing family, choosing to believe good things were possible, she'd found not just survival, but something infinitely more valuable. She'd found herself. The woman she was meant to be, strong and scarred and capable of fierce love and fiercer determination. The woman who'd survived impossible odds and built a life worth living from the wreckage. The woman who'd learned that sometimes the boldest act wasn't fighting the world alone, but letting someone stand beside you. Outside, the wind whispered through the grass, carrying the promise of tomorrow. And inside the small cabin on the Wyoming frontier, 3 people slept peacefully. A family forged by hardship, sealed by choice, and strengthened by the daily decision to keep choosing each other. The widow and the stranger, the story Eli had called it. But that wasn't quite right, Eliza thought drowsily. It wasn't a story about a widow or a stranger. It was a story about a woman who survived, a man who stayed, and a boy who thrived because 2 broken people had been brave enough to build something whole. It was a story about love, not the fairy tale kind, but the real kind. The kind that showed up when things were hard, the kind that kept promises, the kind that proved, day after day, that hope wasn't naive and trust wasn't foolish, and choosing to believe in good things was an act of courage, not weakness. It was a story about home, not a place, but a feeling. The feeling of being known and chosen and loved for exactly who you were, scars and all. And if that wasn't worth surviving for, worth fighting for, worth risking everything for, then nothing was.